Picture a room that smells like egg yolk, vinegar, and something you cannot quite name. Something chemical and wrong, something that coats the back of your throat and sits there for hours. Now fill that room with darkness. Not the comfortable darkness of a bedroom, but working darkness. Functional darkness. The kind of darkness that has a purpose. A red lamp in the corner throwing everything into the colour of old blood. Trays of liquid that hiss faintly when you lower something into them. Shelves of glass plates wrapped in black cloth, each one holding an image that isn't visible yet, each one holding something that will become a face. Add the smell of a dead child in the next room. Add the particular silence of a house where grief has moved in and taken up residence in every corner. Add a man outside the door who's paying good money and expects good work, and expects it quickly, because the body cannot wait. That's where you are tonight. That's where we're going. I make these history stories, and I genuinely do not know whether any of you actually sleep to them, or whether you're all just lying there with your eyes open, quietly fascinated by how strange people were, how strange we still are, how thin the line is between the things we do to comfort ourselves and the things we do because we are afraid. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Turn off the light if you haven't already. Here we go. The year is 1878. The city is London. You're 18 years old, you have been in this city for 11 weeks, and you're standing in a dark room that used to be a broom cupboard, developing a photograph of a woman who died this morning of scarlet fever, aged 31. And the strange thing, the thing you've been turning over in your mind all evening as the chemicals worked, and the image slowly emerged, is not that you are doing this at all, but that the woman's husband specifically asked that she look asleep, not dead, asleep. He said this through the door of the parlour while your employer, Mr. Aldridge, was arranging the body. He said it in a voice so careful it barely qualified as speech. He said, "I want her to look as though she's just resting, as though she might open her eyes. And here is the thing nobody tells you before you take this job. Here is the thing that will follow you from room to room in this city, that will sit in the corner of your mind when you're trying to sleep. There is almost no difference. A sleeping woman and a dead woman, arranged properly, lit properly, photographed from the correct angle. There is almost no difference at all. The camera cannot tell. The glass plate cannot tell. The silver salts that fix the image and hold it forever cannot tell. Sleep looks like death. Death looks like sleep. And for 23 shillings and sixpence, Mr. Edmund Aldridge of Baker Street will make sure that nobody who looks at that photograph can say for certain which one it is. Your name is William Marsh. You come from a village in Wiltshire called Britford, which is 3 miles from Salisbury and approximately 800 years from London, not in distance, but in everything else that matters. Your father is a carpenter. His father was a carpenter before him. You were meant to be a carpenter too, except that when you were 14, a travelling photographer set up his equipment in the village square and took portraits for 6pence each, and you watched him work for 6 hours and refused to leave and asked so many questions that by the end of the afternoon he had given you his card and told you to write to him when you were older. You wrote to him at 16, no reply. You wrote again at 17, no reply. At 18, you took the train to London with a letter of introduction from the Salisbury photographer who occasionally used your developing skills, a change of clothes, and £3 and 4 shillings that you'd been saving since you were 15. You found Mr. Aldridge's studio through a notice in a newspaper. You showed up at the door. You explained that you had experience. You demonstrated that your hands were steady and your eyes were good, and you could work in darkness without breaking things. You got the job. The salary is 12 shillings a week, which is not enough, but it is something. And the room above the studio is included, which is small and cold but dry. And the work is interesting. That is the word you've settled on. Interesting. Not good. Not comfortable. Not what you expected. But interesting in the way that a wound is interesting, in the way that you cannot stop looking even when you know you should look away. Mr. Aldridge's studio does 3 kinds of work. The first kind is portraits, families, engaged couples, businessmen, society ladies, children in their Sunday best, the bread and butter, the thing that keeps the lights on. You take the clients through to the studio, you arrange them against the backdrop, you adjust the lighting, you prepare the plate, you take the exposure, you develop the image, you mount it on card and tie it with ribbon and send them home happy, simple, mechanical, a trade. The second kind is events, weddings occasionally, civic occasions, a mayor cutting something open, a building being completed, the sort of photographs that end up in newspapers or hung in committee rooms and looked at by men with moustaches who feel important. The third kind is this. The third kind is what you're doing right now, at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, standing in a former broom cupboard that smells like silver and death, watching a face appear slowly in a tray of developer as if rising from deep water. Post-mortem photography. Death portraits. The Victorians have a complicated relationship with death, and I need you to understand what that means, because it's not like anything in the world you're living in right now. Death in 1878 is not something that happens in hospitals, away from the family, managed by professionals who keep it tidy and quick and at a distance. Death in 1878 happens at home, in the parlour, in the bedroom, in the kitchen. Children die in their own beds and are laid out in the front room, and the family sits with them for 3 days, because it is what you do, because it is how you say goodbye, because it is the only way you know to make the loss feel real before you let them go into the ground. And then someone invented the camera, and suddenly there was another way. A way to keep one image, one last image. Before the coffin lid went down, before the earth went over, before the face you loved became something you were no longer allowed to see. You could have a photograph. You could have it framed on the mantelpiece. You could hold it in your hands on the bad nights. You could show your other children years later, this is who was here before you. This is who we lost. This is who we carry. And so people send for the photographer, and the photographer sends for you. The woman's face in the tray is coming clear now. You can see her features, strong jaw, dark hair arranged carefully around her head on the pillow, eyes closed, a small smile. That was Mr. Aldridge's doing, a technical trick he showed you in your first week. The mouth relaxes naturally after death. If you arrange it right, if you set the chin correctly before rigor sets in, you can achieve something that reads as peaceful. She looks like she's sleeping. She looks like she might open her eyes. Your hands are submerged in the developer, and the cold of it has moved past your fingers and up your wrists and settled somewhere in your forearms. The chemical smell is so thick tonight that you can taste it on your tongue. There's a bruise on your right knee from where you walked into the corner of the plate cabinet this morning in the dark. You haven't eaten since midday. You're tired in the specific way that comes not from physical effort, but from being required to feel things that you don't have words for yet. You lift the plate carefully, tilt it to let the excess developer run off, and transfer it to the stop bath. The image freezes, stops changing. This is the moment when it becomes permanent, and you always feel something in this moment, some small shift in your chest that you can't quite name. The woman is fixed now. This is how she will look forever. In this exact second of this exact evening, in this expression that says sleeping to everyone who looks at it and knows in the quiet part of their minds that it says something else entirely. You take it through to the fixing bath. The whole process takes maybe 20 minutes when you know what you're doing, and you know what you're doing. That's the one thing you can say for certain about yourself in London so far. When you are in this room, in this red dark, with your hands in these trays, you know what you're doing. Everything else is still a mystery. Mr. Aldridge is waiting when you bring the finished plate upstairs. He is sitting in the small office next to the studio, drinking tea from a chipped cup, looking at nothing in particular with the expression he always has at the end of a death sitting. Not distressed, not satisfied, but somewhere in between. Resolved, maybe. He is a small man, Mr. Aldridge, 52 years old, which seems ancient to you, but which you will later understand is not old at all. Just a man who has done hard work for a long time. He has excellent hands, steady and precise, capable of adjusting a dead woman's hair with the same care he would give to straightening a painting on a wall. He doesn't look like a man who photographs the dead for a living. He looks like a solicitor's clerk. Neat grey coat, good boots, careful parting in his thinning hair. When he speaks, his voice is even and considered, and he has the specific quality of a man who has learned to keep his own reactions entirely private. "How did it come out?" he asks. "Good, I think. The expression is right." He takes the plate and holds it to the lamp, turning it slightly, examining it from different angles. This is a ritual you have watched him perform approximately 30 times now, and every time he does the same thing. Checks the focus, checks the exposure, checks the expression, and then checks the hands. He always looks at the hands left. You asked him why, once, and he said, "The face can be arranged, but the hands show how the body was found." The hands show whether it was peaceful. He nods, puts the plate down, picks up his tea. 3 copies, he says, "for tomorrow morning. The family's collecting at 10. 3 copies of a dead woman by tomorrow morning." You have developed approximately 400 photographs in the 11 weeks since you arrived, and you have never quite gotten used to the calm, businesslike way this man discusses the work. It's not coldness. You understood that fairly early. It's distance. It's the distance that allows him to do the work at all. The distance that is the only thing standing between a man and the full weight of what it means to stand in a parlour with a family's grief pressing against every wall, and still set your tripod correctly, still calculate your exposure, still do the job properly so that the image comes out right, and the family has something to hold on to. You're learning that distance. You haven't learned it yet. "There's a letter," Mr. Aldridge says, nodding toward the desk. You pick it up. The handwriting is careful, deliberate, the kind of script that suggests a woman who was taught to write properly and takes it seriously. The paper is good quality, a cream so pale it's almost white. The letter is from a Mrs. Hartley. She lives in Kensington, in one of the white stucco streets off the park. She's writing to inquire about a particular kind of photograph, not a portrait, not a death photograph, not exactly. Something she describes in 3 increasingly circuitous paragraphs as a photograph of her husband while resting. You read it twice. Then you read the last paragraph again, the one where she says, "My husband is gravely ill." He may not remain with us long. I have tried to have his portrait taken, but he refuses to sit. He finds the process uncomfortable and has declined on 3 occasions. I had wondered whether it might be possible for Mr. Aldridge to visit our home and take the photograph while my husband sleeps, when he would not be aware of the procedure, so that we might have some likeness of him in his final weeks while he is still living. You put the letter down. Your hands are cold from the developer, and the cold has spread further now, past your elbows. The studio is quiet and smells of the chemicals you've brought with you out of the darkroom on your clothes and skin. Outside, Baker Street is moving. You can hear it even at this hour. Horses, a carriage, someone shouting something in the direction of Marylebone. The city never stops making noise. In Britford the nights were so quiet you could hear the river, and you spent your first 2 weeks in London lying awake with your heart racing, convinced that something was wrong, that the constant noise was warning of something, before you understood that this was just the sound of 800,000 people existing simultaneously, and there was nothing to be afraid of. Or rather, that there was plenty to be afraid of, but the noise wasn't it specifically. Mr. Aldridge has read the letter already. He is watching you read it. What do you think? He asks. This surprises you. He doesn't often ask what you think. It seems straightforward, you say carefully. Technically, is there a reason it wouldn't be? Mr. Aldridge puts his teacup down. He looks at the letter for a moment without touching it. Have you heard, he says, about the fear? You haven't. He explains it the way he explains most things, systematically, without editorializing, presenting the information and allowing you to draw your own conclusions. The fear of being photographed while sleeping. It sounds, when he first describes it, like the kind of superstition that sensible people dismiss immediately. And sensible people do dismiss it. And yet here is the letter from Mrs. Hartley, written on good cream paper by a sensible woman who presumably considers herself rational, specifically requesting that the photograph be taken while her husband is unaware of it, because if he were aware of it, he would refuse. He would refuse. Not because of vanity, not because he dislikes cameras in general. She says he has sat for portraits before, that there are good likenesses of him from 15 years ago, before the illness made him refuse, but because of something specific to being photographed asleep. The fear is not simple. That's the first thing Mr. Aldridge tells you, and he's right. Because when you start to turn it over in your mind in the days that follow, when you start asking questions and listening to the answers, what you find is not one fear, but a cluster of fears that have grown around each other like roots, each one feeding the others, each one with its own internal logic that you can follow, even if you don't believe it. The first root, the camera takes something. This is not unique to sleep photography. The belief that a photograph steals something from the subject, their spirit, their soul, something less definable and more uncomfortable than either word. This was common in the early years of photography, and was still common in 1878, especially among people who had grown up before cameras were ordinary, before portraits of ordinary people were possible, before you could have your face fixed on a glass plate and multiplied and sent through the post. The idea that an image is not a representation but a capture, a taking, that something passes from the person to the plate and does not return. And if the camera takes something from a living person while they are awake, what does it take from a person while they are asleep? Because sleep is different. You understand this better now than you did when you arrived in London, surrounded by the particular Victorian preoccupation with the boundary between sleep and death, which is not a modern preoccupation Not your era's obsession, but was theirs with a completeness that is hard to explain now. Sleep in 1878 is not merely rest. Sleep is a small death. The Victorians use that phrase. They use it with a lightness that suggests it is not metaphor but description. You go to sleep every night and something of you departs, and what returns in the morning is most of you, but perhaps not quite all. The sleeper is not present. Not in the way that a waking person is present. The sleeper is somewhere else, somewhere between, and the body lies there like an empty house, like something left unlocked. And the camera, which is already in the business of taking, which has already established its capacity to take something from a person in the act of documentation, what happens when it points itself at an empty house? The second route. The photograph looks like death. You know this one. You know it in your hands from the work you've been doing for 11 weeks. A sleeping person and a dead person, photographed correctly, are almost indistinguishable. Post-mortem photography has made this fact visible, has made it public, has distributed it across 10,000 mantelpieces across England, where families have a photograph of someone they know was dead when it was taken, and yet who looks, in the image, exactly like a person who fell asleep on the parlour sofa and forgot to wake up. The visual grammar of sleep and death is the same. The closed eyes, the relaxed face, the horizontal body, the stillness. To have your photograph taken while sleeping is to have your photograph taken looking exactly as you will look when you're dead. Some people find this comforting. The Victorians find a great deal comfort in death imagery, in the rituals of mourning, in the jet brooches and the black-edged stationery and the locks of hair sealed in lockets. Proximity to death is familiar territory for them. The idea that a sleeping photograph resembles a death photograph is not universally terrifying. For some families it is precisely the point, a way of preparing, of pre-grieving, of keeping both images, the living and the dead, in the same visual language. But for others, the third route is the one that keeps you thinking. The third route is this. Several people in the years since photography became widely available have been photographed sleeping and subsequently died. Not all of them were ill already. Not all of them were old. Some of them were young and apparently healthy, and they were photographed sleeping for various reasons: artistic, sentimental, practical. And then, not immediately, but within weeks or months, they died. And the stories spread the way stories of that kind always spread, which is to say quickly and with embellishment and with the particular momentum of something that arrives with an explanation already attached. The photograph did it. The camera took something. They looked like they were dead in the photograph, and then they were dead. And those two facts are connected. You don't believe this. You need to say that clearly. You are 18 years old, and you have a rational mind, and you have worked with photographic chemicals long enough to understand them as chemistry, as processes with explanations, not as magic, and not as soul capture. You do not believe that a camera can kill, but here is the thing. Here is the thing you turn over in your mind during the dark developing hours, in the red-lit cupboard with your hands in the cold baths and the face of the dead woman fresh in your memory. It doesn't matter whether you believe it, because Mrs. Hartley believes it, and she wants it done anyway. She wants it done while her husband is asleep, which means she wants it done while her husband is unaware, which means she is willing to risk, in her own framework, in her own cosmology of fear. She's willing to risk what the camera might take from her sleeping husband, because the alternative is having no photograph of him at all. That is how afraid she is of him dying without a photograph. She's more afraid of that than she is of the camera killing him. Think about that for a moment. Think about what it means to love someone so much that you are willing to take the risk, even a superstitious risk, even a risk that the rational part of you dismisses as nonsense, because the other risk, the risk of losing him without a record of his face, is so much worse. You put the letter back on the desk. "I'll take the job," Mr. Aldridge says. Not asking you, just stating it. He picks up his teacup, finishes his tea, puts it down. "We'll go Thursday. Get some sleep, William." The stairs up to your room are 14 steps. You know this because you counted them in your first week when you were still learning the geography of the building, still mapping out where things were in the dark. The room is on the 3rd floor, directly above the studio, which means on portrait days you can hear the clients through the floorboards. The scrape of the posing chair, Mr. Aldridge's careful instructions, occasionally a child refusing to cooperate. Tonight the building is quiet. The street outside is not. It never is. Your room contains a bed with a rope mattress and a wool blanket that smells faintly of the previous occupant, a boy named George who apparently left 6 months before you arrived and whose exact circumstances Mr. Aldridge has never elaborated on. A washstand with a basin and a jug. A small window that looks out over the courtyard behind the building, where the coal is stored and the dust bins accumulate, and at 3 a.m. sometimes a cat sits on the wall and screams at nothing. You fill the basin from the jug. The water is cold. Cold in the way that water in October in London is cold, which is a different cold from Wiltshire, harder somehow, more serious. You wash your hands thoroughly. The chemical smell doesn't come off completely. It hasn't come off completely since your first day. Your hands smell of silver nitrate and whatever the developer leaves behind and underneath that, very faintly. The ghost of something biological that you try not to identify. You sit on the edge of the bed. Your right knee throbs where you walked into the cabinet. Your eyes are tired from the red dark hours, from the particular strain of watching images emerge in poor light. The backs of your hands are dry and slightly rough, beginning to crack at the knuckles from the constant immersion in chemicals. You apply a little lanolin from the pot on the washstand. Mr. Aldridge showed you this, told you that it was not vanity but practicality, that cracked hands allowed the silver nitrate into the skin and caused staining that wouldn't come out for weeks. Your hands in the lamplight are the hands of someone who works with them. They don't look like the hands you had in Wiltshire, the hands that built things with your father. The carpenter's hands, they look like different hands. London hands. You lie down on the bed without fully undressing, which is something you told yourself you would stop doing but haven't. The blanket is thin, but the room is not freezing, not yet. Give it another month. You know this because George, whoever George was, left notes in pencil on the inside of the window frame. Small, practical observations clearly made for the benefit of whoever came next. October, tolerable. November, get the extra blanket from the box under the stairs. December, there is a gap in the wall behind the washstand where the wind comes through and you need to stuff it with newspaper, or you'll lose sensation in your feet by midnight. You have not yet found the extra blanket. You file this information away for later. Tomorrow you will develop 3 copies of the dead woman in the tray downstairs. Tomorrow you will mount them and wrap them, and have them ready for 10 o'clock. Tomorrow evening there is a portrait sitting for a family from Paddington, husband, wife, 3 children, and you will prepare the studio and load the plates and do all the things that need doing. Tomorrow is a full day, a working day, an ordinary day. On Thursday you're going to Kensington to photograph a dying man while he sleeps. London makes noise outside your window. a horse, a carriage, voices rising and falling somewhere on Baker Street, an argument or a celebration, impossible to tell at this distance. The city exists at every hour. It doesn't pause. It doesn't consider whether it's been intrusive. It just continues. 800,000 people breathing and moving and conducting their business and living their lives simultaneously, indifferently, without particular concern for an 18-year-old boy from Wiltshire who is lying awake on a rope mattress trying to understand what he's got himself into. The woman in the developing tray is fixed now. The image will not change. Whatever expression Mr. Aldridge arranged on her face, whatever piece he gave her, is permanent. 3 copies of it will hang on 3 walls in different rooms of a house in, you didn't note the address, somewhere on the south side of the river, and the husband who loved her will look at her sleeping face and find something there, some comfort, and it will not be a lie exactly. It will be the truth of how she looked in those last hours, the truth of how the chemicals recorded the light. Your eyes are heavy. The October dark presses against the window. Somewhere in the building below, in the studio with its backdrop and its posing chair, and its careful professional distance from everything that actually matters, there's a plate of glass with a dead woman's face on it. She looks like she's sleeping. You sleep. You wake before the bells. That's something London has done to you in 11 weeks. Recalibrated your internal clock to the city's rhythms. You were never an early riser in Wiltshire. Here you are awake before 6 every morning without choosing to be, pulled up out of sleep by the sound of the milk carts on the street below, by the general sense of urgency that the city broadcasts before dawn, the feeling that things are already in motion and you are required to be part of them. The basin has a skin of cold on its surface, not ice. It's not cold enough for that yet, but something close. You break it with your knuckles, splash water on your face. The shock of it travels from your face down through your neck and shoulders and wakes up everything that the sleeping hadn't. You look at yourself in the small mirror on the washstand. This is a habit you developed in the first week, not out of vanity, but as a kind of check. A way of confirming that you are still the person you were the night before, that something has not shifted in the dark. You look like what you are, a young man who's been doing difficult work for several weeks. Your face has got thinner. Not from hunger. Mr. Aldridge feeds you adequately, plain food but enough. But from something harder to name. The specific thinness that comes from sustained attention to things that are difficult. You dress, trousers, shirt, waistcoat. Your one good coat which you keep for portrait days and delivery days when you might be seen by clients. Your working coat. Old, stained despite your best efforts, permanently marked with silver nitrate at the cuffs where the solutions have splashed, hangs on the back of the door. It smells like the darkroom. Everything you own smells like the darkroom, to varying degrees. Downstairs the studio is cold and grey in the early light. The portraits from yesterday's work, the dead woman's plates, are on the shelf in order. You take them through to the printing room and begin the process of making copies, album and paper, sensitized with silver chloride. The plates laid in contact with the paper under glass, then held in the light until the image prints out. Wash, fix, tone, wash, dry. The morning filling with the smell of chemicals and the slow work of your hands. This is what you know how to do. This is the thing you came to London to learn and are learning. The technical knowledge of light and chemistry, and the ways that an image can be captured and made permanent, held against the decay of memory. Photography in 1878 is still young enough to be considered remarkable. Most of your clients have never had their portrait taken before. When they see the finished image, their own face frozen, perfect, preserved, their reaction is always the same: a small silence, and then something that looks almost like grief, as if the image reminds them that the face they see in the mirror every day will not always be there, that this moment is the only moment it will ever be exactly this, and now it is fixed forever and can be kept. That is why people pay for photographs, not because they like themselves, because they are afraid. By 8 o'clock you have the 3 prints drying and the studio cleaned from yesterday, and the early kettle on the small stove in the office. Mr. Aldridge comes down at 8:15, as always. He eats his breakfast: bread, a scraping of butter, a piece of hard cheese, standing at the office desk, reading his correspondence. He thanks you for the prints without looking at them. He is already thinking about the day ahead. "We'll reply to Mrs. Hartley this morning," he says, "Thursday at 2 o'clock. If her husband sleeps in the afternoon, which he says he does, 2 gives us good light from the windows. What equipment will we need? The whole half plate. Tripod, of course. 3 plates minimum, probably more, and..." He pauses, breaks off a piece of cheese. "We'll need to be quiet. Quieter than usual. The exposure will have to be long. The light in a sick room is never good. He'll need to stay still for at least 20 seconds. And if he wakes up? He won't. But if he does..." Mr. Aldridge looks at you. Just for a moment. Not long. Not like an assessment. More like a recalibration. "Then we take his portrait," he says, "and we tell Mrs. Hartley that the arrangement changed, and we manage it." He goes back to his cheese. The conversation is over. The Hartley house is at the edge of Kensington, the kind of street where the houses are wide and white and not quite old enough to have the patina of genuine old money but are trying very hard. You arrive at 2 o'clock on a cold Thursday, you and Mr. Aldridge, with the half-plate camera in its case and the tripod over your shoulder and the plate holders wrapped in their black cloth, in the carpet bag you're carrying in your left hand. Your right hand is free. You always keep your right hand free when carrying equipment in London. Your right hand is for steadying yourself, for waving away the cab horses that veer closer than they should on the narrow streets, for balance on the wet cobbles. The street smells of coal smoke and horse manure and something sweeter underneath. Lilacs from a garden somewhere, impossibly late in the season, or a memory of them that your mind is providing because the air needs something to redeem it. A maid answers the door, young, 14 or 15, her cap slightly crooked, her expression that specific compound of nervousness and importance that comes from having been told to answer the door for the photographer, and understanding that this is a significant occasion without being clear on why. She takes your coats without speaking, leads you up the stairs, carpeted stairs, a good quality carpet, not new but not threadbare, to the first floor landing where Mrs. Hartley is waiting. Mrs. Hartley is younger than her letter suggested, 35 perhaps, or a little younger. She's dressed in dark green, not mourning but something adjacent to it, a colour that keeps its options open. Her face is composed, but her hands are not. She's holding them clasped in front of her with a firmness that is the opposite of relaxation, and when she reaches out to shake Mr. Aldridge's hand, the movement is slightly too quick. "Thank you for coming," she says. Her voice is low. The whole house is low. Not whispering, but operating at a reduced volume, the way houses do when there is serious illness in them, as if noise might crack something. "It's our honour to be of service," Mr. Aldridge says. He means it, you've learned. He has not been polite. He believes genuinely that what he does is a service, that keeping images of people is a meaningful thing, that his work matters. Mrs. Hartley looks at you. You're not introduced. You're the equipment. This is fine. This is normal. You have learned to be invisible in other people's houses, to move carefully, to take up the smallest possible amount of space, to avoid looking directly at things that are personal and private. An apprentice photographer is a kind of ghost, present but not witnessed. He's sleeping now, she says. He usually sleeps until 4, sometimes later. The laudanum keeps him under. Laudanum. Tincture of opium dissolved in alcohol. The standard Victorian solution to serious pain, to anxiety, to anything that required a person to be quieter than they naturally wanted to be. Half the sick rooms in London smell of it. A sweetish, slightly cloying smell, like honey gone wrong. She leads you down the first floor corridor to a door at the end, pauses outside it. The window faces north, she says quietly. I've opened the curtains. There should be enough light. We'll use a very long exposure, Mr. Aldridge says, equally quiet. Please don't be concerned if it seems to take some time. He won't move. She flinches slightly at that last phrase. It wasn't well chosen, you think, though you don't say so. Won't move because of the laudanum. That's what Mr. Aldridge meant. But in context, in a sick-room corridor, in the language of a household that has already begun to rehearse a future without this man, won't move carries other freight. She opens the door. The room smells of illness. You know this smell now in the way that you know the smell of the darkroom, as information, as a set of data about what is happening in this space. Old sweat. The particular sweetish sour smell of a body fighting something it is losing to. The laudanum underneath everything. Camphor from somewhere. A small brazier of it perhaps, which Victorians use against sickness as ritual as much as remedy. The staleness of a room where the windows are kept closed except when someone decides they should be opened for light, and then closed again because the patient feels the cold. Mr. Hartley is lying in a large bed in the centre of the room. The bed has been positioned, clearly recently, carefully, to catch the maximum amount of light from the north window, which is standing open an inch, letting in the grey October afternoon in thin slices. He is not a large man. He has the particular diminishment of long illness, where the body seems to have been editing itself, removing what it cannot afford to maintain. His face on the pillow is angular, the bones more visible than they would have been a year ago. His hair is grey at the temples and still dark on top, and it is arranged carefully. Mrs. Hartley has been in before you, has done this, has smoothed his hair and adjusted the position of his hands on the coverlet, and perhaps moved the pillow marginally, perhaps made 100 small adjustments that she would not be able to articulate, that came from love rather than plan. His hands on the coverlet are still, very still. His face is still. He looks asleep. You make yourself think that. Asleep. Not the other thing. The other thing can wait its turn. Mr. Aldridge has been in worse sick rooms and does not hesitate. He moves to the window, assesses the light, moves to the bed, assesses the angles. He has a specific way of looking at a scene before he photographs it, a kind of stillness that settles over him, the rest of him going quiet while his eyes do the work. He tilts his head, steps back, steps sideways. You set up the tripod with the care that the situation requires. Slowly, with no unnecessary noise. The brass fittings don't clank because you hold them. The legs don't scrape because you place them. The whole apparatus assembles in near silence, and when it's up and level, you look to Mr. Aldridge, who nods. The camera. You lift it from its case. The half-plate camera is not light. It's a wooden box the size of a small suitcase, with a brass lens at the front and a focusing screen at the back. And the weight of it is familiar in your hands now. The specific balance of it, the way you hold it. You attach it to the tripod head and lock it down and step back to give Mr. Aldridge room to work the front. He focuses slowly under the black cloth, watching the image form on the ground glass, adjusting the lens until the sleeping face is sharp. He emerges from under the cloth, looks at you, holds out his hand for the plate holder. The plate is already sensitized. You prepared it this morning. You pass it to him, and he slides it into the camera and withdraws the dark slide. 25 seconds, he says. Not allowed. He mouths it, looks at his watch. The room is so quiet you can hear the watch ticking. You can hear Mr. Hartley breathing. The breathing is shallow and uneven, with a slight pause at the end of each exhale that makes you count. 1, 2, 3. The pause and then the inhale comes. It comes every time. You watch for it every time. 25 seconds is a long time when you're trying not to breathe. Mr. Aldridge makes the exposure. His hand on the lens cap, lifting it, counting, replacing it. 3 times he does this to be sure. 3 separate exposures on 3 separate plates, each one 25 seconds, each one in silence, each one with the small pause in Mr. Hartley's breathing somewhere in the middle of it. On the 3rd exposure, Mrs. Hartley makes a small sound in the doorway. You don't look at her. You're watching the camera, watching Mr. Aldridge's hands, keeping still, but you hear it. It is the sound of a person who's been holding something for a very long time and has felt it shift slightly. Mr. Aldridge replaces the dark slide, steps back, looks at you. You begin to disassemble the tripod. It takes 4 minutes to pack everything. 4 minutes of careful quiet, of not banging things, of moving at a speed calibrated to the seriousness of the room. Mrs. Hartley has moved into the room and is standing near the bed, not touching her husband, just close. Mr. Aldridge goes to her quietly and says something you don't catch, and she nods, and her hands, which were clasped so hard in the corridor, are at her sides now, slightly open. In the corridor, carrying the equipment toward the stairs, you hear her begin to cry. The muffled, controlled crying of someone who has decided that this is the moment, that the photograph has opened something, that the grief can be let out a little now and then put back in its box. The front door closes behind you. Baker Street is bright and cold and indifferent. A cab passes. A child is selling newspapers on the corner, the headline something about Parliament. A dog is sitting in a doorway, watching the street with professional attention. You walk. The camera case is in your right hand. The tripod is over your left shoulder. The plate holders are in the bag. In those plate holders are 3 glass plates, each one holding an image of a sleeping man that his wife was afraid to have taken, that she was more afraid not to have. Good work, Mr. Aldridge says. You're not sure whether he means the technique or the silence or something else. You say nothing. You walk back through the October streets toward Baker Street, and the city folds around you as it always does, and the image of the man on the pillow stays with you. The stillness of him, the arrangement of his hands, the specific quality of that breathing with its pauses, and you do not yet know that Mr. Hartley will be dead in 19 days. You do not know this because it has not happened, but you will know it, and when you know it, you will remember the pauses in his breathing, and you will think about the plates in their holders, the 3 images you carried home through the cold afternoon, and you will try to calculate what it means and whether it means anything. It means nothing. You're going to tell yourself that, and you'll be right. But tell that to the part of your mind that notices things in the dark. The first thing about Mr. Aldridge that surprises you consistently is how little he talks. Not silence from coldness. When he does speak, it's considered and often warm in a contained way. But the specific economy of a man who has found that most words are unnecessary. In the 3 months you work for him before Christmas, you have 3 conversations that you would call real conversations. Conversations with a depth in them. Conversations that you carry with you afterward. The first one happens in the dark room. You're developing the Hartley plates. It's the evening of the day you took them, and Mr. Aldridge comes to stand in the doorway, which is unusual. He doesn't usually come in while you're working. He leans against the door frame with his arms crossed and watches you work for a while without speaking. You're thinking about whether it works, he says. You don't have to ask what he means. I don't believe it, you say. The photograph taking something. No, he says. Neither do I. But. He watches you ease the plate into the developer. The red lamp is casting its particular colour over everything, making the room look like the inside of something alive. I photographed a man 3 years ago, he says. A solicitor from Bloomsbury. He was not ill. He was 51 years old and in excellent health. His wife wanted a portrait. He refused to sit. He was afraid of cameras. Not of the superstition, just of the process, of having to be still for so long, of the way the photograph would look at him afterward. She arranged for me to photograph him while he napped in his chair after Sunday lunch. He pauses. He died 6 weeks later. A stroke. Nothing to do with photography. Nothing to do with anything except the way blood moves in a man's arteries when he's 51 years old. And his wife wrote me a letter. She blamed me. The image is coming up in the tray. You can see Mr. Hartley's face emerging from the chemistry, the carefully arranged stillness of it. Not legally, Mr. Aldridge says. Not formally. She didn't sue. But she wrote me a letter saying that something had been taken from him, that he had been photographed without his knowledge and something had been taken, and that this was why he died. You transfer the plate to the stop bath. What did you do? I wrote back, he says. I said I was sorry for her loss. I said that I understood her grief, and that it was natural to look for a reason. I said that the photography did not take his life. I said this clearly. Did she believe you? No. He uncrosses his arms, straightens up. His silhouette in the doorway is very clear against the faint light of the office behind him. She didn't believe me, he says, and I could not prove it to her. That's the nature of this kind of fear. It attaches itself to events that have other explanations, and it provides its own explanation, and the two explanations occupy the same space, and you cannot demonstrate that one is wrong by pointing to the other. He looks at the tray where Mr. Hartley's face is fixed now, still. We do good work, he says. We give people images that they can keep. We give them something against the loss. That's the job. The rest is other people's beliefs, and other people's beliefs are not our business. He goes back to the office. You finish the development. 3 plates of a sleeping man, his breathing with its 3-count pause, his carefully arranged hands, his thin grey-templed face, turned toward the north window light. 3 copies by tomorrow morning. The family will collect them on Monday. Mr. Hartley is dead by Thursday of the following week. You know because Mrs. Hartley sends a note. Not to complain. Not to accuse. A formal note, in the same good cream paper, informing Mr. Aldridge of the death and thanking him for the photographs, which she describes as a great comfort. She says that she looks at them each morning. She says that in the photographs he looks at peace. He looks asleep, you think. He looks the way he looked that afternoon in the sick room with the laudanum in his blood and the north light falling across his face and the camera on its tripod making its long exposures. He looks like a man who will wake up. He will not wake up. This is the thing you're trying to hold together. The thing you keep examining from different angles in the hours when the developing work is done and the studio is closed and you're lying on your rope mattress listening to London being alive outside. The photograph looks like sleep. The sleep looked like death. And the death came 19 days later, and you were there with your hands on the tripod and your eyes on the lens cap, and you counted the exposures and you heard the breathing with its pauses, and you carried the plates home through the October cold and developed them in the red dark and made them permanent. And he died, and the photographs were a comfort. And you don't know what to do with that. You go to the Victoria Embankment on a Sunday in November to stand by the river and think. Not because you are dramatic, but because you have been in the darkroom for 6 days running, and you need to be outside, and the river is the part of London that makes the most sense to you, the part that you can orientate by. In Britford there was a river, different size, but water in a city has the same grammar everywhere, the same suggestion of elsewhere, the same direction. The Thames in November is grey and heavy, carrying itself toward the sea with the confidence of something that has been doing this for a very long time. The embankment is fairly new, the great engineering project that lined the riverbank and pushed the sewers underground and gave London this broad stone walkway along its most important artery. The smell here is still partly the river, partly the mud at low tide, partly the vast engine of the city that breathes its coal smoke over everything, but it's better than most of London. The air has more sky in it. You walk. You think about the fear. Because here is what you've been accumulating in the 3 months since you arrived, without quite realizing that you were accumulating it. Evidence of the fear's spread. The Hartley Commission is not the only one. Mr. Aldridge's books contain 3 other cases in the past 2 years alone. 3 cases where the photograph was requested to be taken of a sleeping subject. In 2 of those cases, the subject was ill. In 1 case, the subject was a child. The child case you know about because you developed the plates. A boy of 9, the son of a manufacturer from Clapham. The father came in person, not the mother. He explained this to Mr. Aldridge in the reception room while you were preparing equipment and trying not to listen. He wanted a photograph of his son sleeping because the boy refused to sit for a portrait. Moved too much. Couldn't stay still. Every portrait attempt had failed. The long exposure required by the technology defeated him. 20 seconds of required stillness was simply impossible for a 9-year-old boy full of energy and life. So the father wanted a sleeping photograph, not a death photograph. The boy was healthy, the father was at pains to say this, completely healthy, a robust child, but a photograph of him sleeping would at least give them something, some image, some fixed likeness, before he grew out of this face and into the next one. And underneath that, underneath the practical explanation, what was underneath? You're not a parent. You're 18 years old, and the concept of having a child is as abstract as the concept of having a pension. But even at 18, even with your limited understanding of what it means to love someone that is also afraid you will lose them, even at 18 you can hear it in the father's voice, the thing under the practical explanation. He wants a photograph of his boy sleeping because the sleeping photograph looks like the death photograph. Because some part of him, the part that is a parent, the part that counts the illnesses and the accidents and the fevers and the 1,000 ordinary dangers of being alive in 1878, some part of him wants to be ready. He wants to have the image in case he needs the image. He wants to pre-photograph the loss. You stand on the embankment and watch the river and think about this for a long time. The thing is, it works. That's the part you keep coming back to. Whatever the reason for wanting a sleeping photograph, fear, love, practicality, grief that hasn't happened yet but is being rehearsed, the photographs work. The Hartley photographs worked. Mrs. Hartley has them now, framed on her mantelpiece probably, and she looks at them each morning and she sees her husband looking peaceful and she is comforted. The image is a lie in one sense. He wasn't peaceful, he was dying. The laudanum was doing its work and the illness was doing its work and he had 19 days left. But it's not a lie in another sense. He was there. He existed. The light from that grey October afternoon did fall on that face, and the chemistry did record it, and the image is real. The sleeping photograph is real. The fear of it is real. The comfort of it is real. All three things are true at the same time, and you are standing on the embankment in November trying to understand how. A barge goes past, heavy and low in the water, loaded with coal from the north. The bargeman is visible at the stern, a dark shape against the grey sky, working the tiller. He doesn't look up. He has been on this river for years, probably, has passed this exact stretch of water thousands of times, and the embankment and the people on it are simply part of the fixed geography, no more remarkable than the bridges. You walk back to Baker Street. The November air is cold enough now to turn your breath visible. Small clouds appearing and disappearing as you walk. Your coat is not warm enough for this and won't be until you can afford a better one, which will be some months yet. You walk quickly, not for warmth exactly, but because movement helps. The studio is dark when you get back. Mr. Aldridge has gone out. The maid who comes in to clean twice a week has left a note saying the kitchen stove needs more coal. You put coal on the kitchen stove, which takes 3 trips to the coal cellar in the courtyard, and by the time you've finished your hands are black and the kitchen is warming, and you wash your hands again, silver and coal, the 2 layers of your working life. There is a new letter on Mr. Aldridge's desk. You shouldn't read it. You read it. Miss Amelia Ashworth, of Belgrave Square. She writes, not in the careful, circuitous language of Mrs. Hartley, but in the direct, slightly confrontational prose of someone who has decided exactly what she wants and expects to get it. She writes to inquire about a sleep portrait, not of anyone else, of herself. She has read, she says, about the practice of photographing sleeping subjects. She finds it artistically interesting. She is herself a student of art, and has been following the recent developments in photography with great interest. She believes that the sleeping portrait has particular qualities that the waking portrait lacks. A quality of truth, she writes, of undefended self. The face in sleep is the face without performance. She would like this captured. She wants to be photographed sleeping. She wants it done properly. A professional, artistic portrait, not a death image, not a memorial. She specifies, I am in excellent health and have no intention of dying soon, and I would like the photograph to reflect a living woman rather than a dead one. I am aware that this distinction requires skill to achieve. She's asking Mr. Aldridge to achieve it. You put the letter down. Outside the kitchen window, the courtyard is dark and the coal cellar is a black rectangle in the brick wall, and the cat from next door is sitting on the wall again, watching something invisible with total conviction. Miss Ashworth, of Belgrave Square, wants to be photographed sleeping, not because she is afraid, not to preserve a dying face, not to have something against the loss, because she is interested in the truth of the sleeping face, because she wants to see herself without the performance, because she is apparently not afraid of any of it. You find this almost as unsettling as everything else. Mr. Aldridge replies to Miss Ashworth's letter on a Tuesday morning, and you watch him do it. He writes with the same evenness he brings to everything, not quickly, not slowly, each sentence considered before it is committed to paper. He uses good ink. His handwriting is clear and upright, the handwriting of a man who values precision. He reads what he's written once, folds the letter, seals it. "You'll take this to Belgrave Square this afternoon," he says. "Shall I wait for a reply?" "No, leave it with the housekeeper." A pause. "And come back the same way you went, not through Pimlico." You have been through Pimlico. You understand the instruction. The walk to Belgrave Square takes you through the beginning of the expensive part of London, the part where the white stucco is recent and the iron railings are freshly painted, and the front steps are swept twice a day by someone whose entire professional purpose is to sweep front steps. The square itself is the kind of London square that exists for its own sake, that justifies itself by being there. All plane trees and iron fencing and the particular quiet of money that is not new enough to be insecure. The houses around it are enormous. You count the windows on the Ashworth house as you approach. 6 across, 4 stories plus the basement below street level, where you can see movement through the small windows, figures passing in the kitchen light. The housekeeper who takes the letter is a large woman in her 50s who looks at you with the expression reserved for tradesmen, not unkind, not warm, entirely calibrated to your exact position in the hierarchy. She takes the letter. She does not offer you anything. She closes the door. You stand on the front steps for a moment. From here you can see across the square to the garden in the centre, the bare branches of the plane trees, a nanny pushing a perambulator along the gravel path inside the railings, 2 pigeons on the path ahead of her, refusing to move until the last possible second. This is where Miss Ashworth lives. This is the world she is navigating, and the question she is asking. Show me my own face without the performance. Show me the truth of my sleeping self, is a question that could only come from someone who lives here, in this square, where performance is the entire medium, where the front steps are swept twice a day and the railings are freshly painted, not because anyone particularly notices, but because to let them go would be to admit something, to let the mask slip. She wants to take her own mask off, with a camera. You walk back to Baker Street the way you were told, not through Pimlico, past the coal merchants and the cab yards and the streets that smell of horse and industry, past the sandwich men walking their boards through the afternoon crowd, past a woman selling chestnuts from a small brazier, the smell of them impossibly good in the November cold, and you spend a penny you can't entirely afford on a paper cone of them and eat them as you walk, burning your fingers because the patience to wait for them to cool is simply not available. The reply comes the next day. Miss Ashworth will see Mr. Aldridge on Friday at 3 o'clock. She would like to discuss the project before committing to a date for the sitting. You'll come, Mr. Aldridge says, not a question. You will come, evidently. Friday's the day after tomorrow, which is a Thursday, and Thursday is a portrait day. The Paddington family that you mentioned is rescheduled from last week. and there is also a single gentleman who has requested a carte de visite sitting, which means multiple exposures, multiple plates, the metronomic work of moving equipment and loading and resetting. You do all of it. The Paddington family arrives at 2 o'clock. The children slightly better behaved than last time, but still fundamentally unwilling. And the father has brought a mechanical toy to keep the youngest still during the exposure, and the youngest wants to operate the toy rather than hold it, which is a problem. And Mr. Aldridge resolves it with a patience that you privately find extraordinary. 20 minutes of negotiation, 3 acceptable exposures. The family leaves satisfied. You clean the studio. The single gentleman arrives at 4, is photographed with the efficient minimum of ceremony, leaves at 4:30. You clean the studio again. You prepare the plates for development. You develop. You fix. You mount. By 9 o'clock Thursday evening, you are tired in the particular way of physical repetition, where the tiredness has soaked into specific places. Your lower back from bending to the camera height, your shoulders from carrying, the joints of your fingers from the plate handling. You eat the supper that Mrs. Aldridge has left covered on the kitchen table. She exists at the margins of the studio life, a quiet presence. She manages the domestic parts of the building and appears occasionally to leave food and offer mild observations about the weather. The supper is stew, thick and a little stale from sitting, but hot, and you eat all of it, and half a piece of bread that was left on the counter. Then you go to bed, and you do not dream, or if you dream you don't remember it, and you wake in the morning to London commencing its 6 o'clock business outside your window. Belgrave Square on Friday afternoon has the particular quality of a November Friday in a rich neighbourhood. Quiet in the way that has money behind it. Everyone either inside or somewhere better. The street traffic, the heavy unhurried movement of carriages rather than the frantic commerce of the working streets. Your breath makes clouds. Your good coat is on, which is better than your working coat, but still not particularly equal to the November cold, which has become serious now. The kind of cold that comes in off the river and presses itself through whatever you're wearing and settles in your ribs. The same housekeeper, the same expression. This time she leads you through. The house is the inside of its outside, large, formal, the entrance hall with its checkered tiles and the mirror and the side table with a vase of late flowers, white chrysanthemums, the smell of them faintly medicinal in the warm indoors air. You follow the housekeeper up a staircase that would contain your entire attic room and have room left over, along a corridor with portraits on the walls, formal oil paintings, family portraits in the old style, faces staring out of their frames with the gravity that painting lends everything. The room you're shown into is a drawing room, south-facing, the last of the afternoon light coming through the tall windows, and Miss Ashworth is standing by the window looking out when you enter. She turns. She's younger than you expected. 23, perhaps 24. She's also not what you expected, which is to say she's not the type you've been building in your head from the letter. The confrontational directness of her writing had suggested something harder, more angular. She is not. She is a woman with an expression of genuine interest, the kind of face that is most alive when thinking, and she is thinking now. She has been thinking when you came in, her attention coming back from somewhere as she turns. She shakes Mr. Aldridge's hand. She shakes yours, which surprises you. Your employer didn't introduce you as an apprentice specifically, but the assumption usually holds regardless. She looks at you when she shakes your hand, which is worse somehow, more exposing, like being seen doing something you were confident nobody was watching. "Thank you for coming," she says. Her voice is what you'd expect, educated, precise, but something in it that isn't quite controlled, a note of something eager underneath. Please sit down. Mr. Aldridge sits. You sit on the edge of a chair that probably costs more than your yearly salary and try to occupy it as lightly as possible. I'll explain what I'm thinking, Miss Ashworth says. She doesn't sit. She stands near the window, one hand resting on the curtain, the light behind her. I've been studying photography for 2 years, technically and in its theory. The relationship between what the camera captures and what the subject is aware of being captured. My argument, and it is an argument I have written about it, I'm working on a paper, is that the most truthful portrait is the one taken without the subject's knowledge, because every portrait taken with the subject's awareness is a collaboration between the subject and the photographer, and the subject inevitably shapes what is captured. Presence rather than simply being. She pauses, looks at Mr. Aldridge. You've done post-mortem work. Yes. And the quality of the images, the expressiveness of the face, you would say it is different from portrait work? It has a different quality, Mr. Aldridge says carefully. More truthful? Not more truthful, less performed. She points at him, actually points with one finger extended the way a lecturer does. That's exactly the word, less performed, because the subject is no longer performing, because the subject is absent in a way, not in the room in the way that a living, waking, self-aware subject is in the room. She begins to move slowly along the window. I want to understand what that quality looks like in a living person, in myself specifically. I want to see my own face without my own interference, and the only way I can think to achieve that is to be photographed in the state where I am, like the subject of the death portrait, absent from the performance, asleep. The room is very quiet. Somewhere in the house below, something is being moved in the kitchen, a pot, something metal on stone. You're not afraid, Mr. Aldridge says, not a challenge, an observation. Of what specifically, he tells her. He gives her the same clean, uneditorialized account he gave you in the darkroom. The roots of the fear, the superstitions, the cases he knows of. He tells it without opinion. He presents it like evidence and gives her room. She listens with her whole attention, the way intelligent people listen who are genuinely surprised by something. People believe this, she says. Many people. And have any of them, the subjects of these sleep photographs, have they actually? Several have died, Mr. Aldridge says, in the weeks or months following, of causes unrelated to photography. And this is attributed, by some, yes. She's quiet. You watch her think. Her hand has left the curtain and is at her chin, one finger resting against her jaw, the thinking posture. Outside the window, the November sky's going grey-orange over the rooftops, the early dark of winter beginning. I think, she says slowly, that the fear is itself the most interesting thing, not whether it's rational, not whether the camera actually takes something, but the fact of the fear, that people believe their sleeping face is dangerous, that sleep makes them vulnerable to a camera in a way that wakefulness does not, that they believe in the camera's power to take something precisely when they are not there to resist it. She looks at you, unexpectedly, directly. What do you think? She says. To you, not to Mr. Aldridge. Your employer does not react. He has learned not to react in a way that would indicate this is unusual. You think of Mr. Hartley on his pillow, the grey-templed face, the breathing with its 3-count pause. You think of the child's case, the 9-year-old who moved too much, the father's voice with the thing underneath it. You think of the woman in the developing tray, the one who looked asleep, who wasn't. You think of the red dark and the chemistry and the 25 seconds of necessary stillness and the silence required to not disturb a man who had 19 days left. I think, you say, and your voice sounds odd to you, too young for the room, that the camera doesn't take anything. I don't believe it does. But I think the people who ask for sleep photographs, the ones who are afraid of them, are right about one thing. The sleeping face is different. It's not less real. But it's different. It's real in a way the person doesn't control. And most people, most of the time, want to control how they are real. Silence. Yes, Miss Ashworth says. Not to you, exactly. To the thought. She looks at Mr. Aldridge. Friday of next week, she says. At 9 in the morning. I have established that I sleep most deeply between 3 and 7, and by 9 I have usually returned, but I am still, apparently, my maid has told me this, I am still in a state of, her word was peaceful. I would like to try to capture that, Mr. Aldridge nods. We'll need the room prepared with maximum available light, he says, and the exposure will take 20 seconds at minimum. She'll need to remain still. I sleep still. My maid confirms this also. I asked specifically. There is something so deliberate about her, so thorough in the preparation, that you find yourself feeling something very close to admiration. She has asked her maid how she sleeps. She has established the hour of deeper sleep and the window of remaining stillness. She has researched the fear and the practice, and the philosophical argument she intends to make with the resulting images. She's going to be photographed sleeping, and she is prepared for it with the rigour of an expedition, and she is not afraid. You think about this all the way back to Baker Street in the dark, the cold settling around your ears, your good coat losing its battle with the November night. You think about the difference between Miss Ashworth's position and Mrs. Hartley's position, separated by 3 weeks and the length of London and approximately everything else that separates them, and yet both ending up in the same place, both asking for the same thing, both wanting a camera pointed at a sleeping face, one afraid, one not, one trying to preserve something against the loss, one trying to see herself without the performance, and the photograph will look the same. That's the part that follows you home through the cold Baker Street evening and up the 14 stairs to your room. The photograph will look the same. You can't tell from a photograph whether the person wanted it or didn't, whether they knew or didn't, whether they were afraid or entirely calm. The image holds the face, the expression, the light and shadow of the real moment. But the inside of the moment, the fear, the love, the grief, the philosophical conviction that the camera cannot capture. The camera takes the outside. Everything else is what you bring to it. You bring the coal up on your way to bed. 2 scuttles, both full, hands black again by the time you're done. The cold of the coal cellar finding the backs of your knees where the coat doesn't reach. You wash your hands. You go to bed. The city makes its noises. You count them as you sometimes do. A cart, a shout, a door, something falling, the distant bell of a church marking 10 o'clock. In Britford by 10 the village was so quiet you could hear your own heartbeat if you listened. Here the heartbeat of London is too loud to hear your own over it. You sleep. The week before the Ashworth sitting, you take on a new type of job. Not new to the studio. Mr. Aldridge has been doing it for years, but new to you. The night work. London in 1878 has approximately 4,000 public houses. and a significant number of them have discovered that a framed print on the wall is both decoration and advertisement. The better class of establishment, the larger gin palaces, the music halls, the supper rooms that are trying to attract a clientele with money, these places commission prints, portraits of performers, promotional images, the kind of thing that hangs in the entrance and suggests that this establishment is serious, that it has its own aesthetic, that it has a relationship with the world of images and therefore of culture. Mr. Aldridge has a contract with 3 such establishments. Twice a month, on Tuesday nights after they close, you go to the venue, set up the equipment, and photograph the principal performers in their stage costumes. The first time you do this, it is a Tuesday in the middle of November, and the venue is a supper room in Covent Garden called the Marquee, which is not the worst of its kind, but is not the best either, occupying a middle position in the hierarchy of establishments that offer an evening of entertainment for the price of supper. The performers are a comedian whose material relies heavily on dialect, a soprano who does drawing-room songs in a manner that suggests she was trained for better things, and a pair of acrobats from somewhere in Eastern Europe who communicate with each other in a language you don't have. It is 11:30 at night when they are available, and the cook has gone home, and the smell of the evening, beer, cigarette smoke, the residue of 100 suppers, the specific compound of human warmth that collects in a closed room over 4 hours, is very strong. You work by gaslight, which is technically sufficient but requires long exposures, and the acrobats especially are problematic because staying still for 20 seconds is not in their nature. One of them makes a joke in their incomprehensible language, and the other laughs and you have to start again. The comedian is easier. He has a performer's stillness, the ability to hold a position and hold it, learned from years of making himself visible and comprehensible from the back row of a theatre. You're loading the second plate for the soprano when she asks you, not Mr. Aldridge. She asks you specifically because Mr. Aldridge is under the focusing cloth and she's looking for someone to address. Whether you've heard about the sleeping portraits, you stop loading the plate. "What have you heard?" you say. She shrugs. She's not a young woman, 40 perhaps, with good bones and the voice of someone who's been using it professionally for a long time. Her dress is the performance dress, dark red silk, slightly aged at the cuffs. "A woman I know, in Islington. She has a friend who had it done, the photograph in sleep." She says it with a precision that suggests she's been thinking about the phrase. "And afterward?" "The photographer had nothing to do with what happened afterward," you say. It comes out more sharply than you intended. She looks at you. Mr. Aldridge emerges from the focusing cloth, looks at you also. "My apologies," you say to her. "I didn't mean—" "No," she says. "You're right." She adjusts the lace at her cuffs. "The woman my friend knows. She's fine. Nothing happened. I wondered whether you'd done any, whether you could tell the difference." "What difference?" "Between a sleeping portrait and a—" She stops. "A death portrait?" She nods. You look at her for a moment. "Not technically," you say. "The chemistry is the same, the process is the same, the light is the same, but you can tell, usually, not from the photograph itself, from what you know when you're taking it." "How?" You think about Mr. Hartley, the 3-count pause, the shallow breathing. "When someone is sleeping, there's movement," you say. "Not enough to ruin the exposure if you're careful, but present. A quality of not stillness, but held stillness. The body resisting the stillness. The body being alive." You pick up the plate holder. "A dead person is perfectly still. The camera is very sensitive to that. I can usually tell which I'm looking at when I'm taking the exposure, even if I couldn't see the rest of the room, even if I had no other information. There's a quality to life that the photography captures, even when you're not trying to capture it. She's quiet for a moment. Then, that's a terrifying thing to know how to notice. Mr. Aldridge says, "Shall we proceed?" She sits for her portrait. She holds the position for 20 seconds with the trained stillness of her profession, and you take the exposure, and she's in the photograph in a way that is alive, entirely and specifically alive, performing even in stillness, even in the formal arrangement of the portrait. Her face a professional face, nothing undefended, nothing like sleep. On Friday morning you arrive at Belgrave Square at 8:45. The equipment is heavier than usual. Mr. Aldridge has brought the best lens, the one he normally reserves for commissions where the reproduction quality needs to be superior, and he has brought 6 plates instead of the usual 3. 6, you said when he was packing. The light will be uncertain, he said, and we won't have the opportunity to retake. The housekeeper lets you in, different this time. Not the same careful professional distance, but a heightened version of it. The particular quality of a servant who's been given instructions she finds unusual, and is observing them precisely without comment. She leads you upstairs, past the family portraits, to the first-floor corridor. A different room this time further along. The bedroom. You feel the difference of the room before you are fully inside it. The bedroom of someone who is sleeping is different from a sick room, different from a parlour, different from the stage-lit formality of a drawing room. It is private in a way that the other rooms are not private. The smell is specific, not unpleasant, a human smell, the smell of someone's sleep, of warmth and breathing and the particular atmosphere of hours of unconsciousness in an enclosed space. Hair on the pillow, a book on the nightstand, a half glass of water. These details arrange themselves as you carry the equipment in, registering in your peripheral vision as you focus on the practical work of setting up. Miss Ashworth is asleep. She's lying on her side, one hand beneath the pillow. Her hair is down, which gives the image immediately a different quality from the Hartley portrait. More private, more genuinely unguarded. She's wearing a white nightdress with a high neck, practical rather than decorative, the nightdress of someone who does not expect to be seen in it. Her face is turned slightly toward the window where the morning light, thin, grey-white November light but present, is coming through the part in the curtains that the maid has prepared. Mr. Aldridge looks at the light, looks at the angle, steps back, steps forward slightly. He has the quality he always has in these situations, the quality of someone who has entirely suspended their personal reaction and is operating purely technically, purely professionally. His eyes are moving, calculating. He holds up 4 fingers, 4 exposures. You load the first plate. The room is very quiet. The sounds of Belgrave Square are present but filtered through the glass and the curtains. Distant, soft, the clop of a horse somewhere. A cart. Inside the room, Miss Ashworth's breathing, which is slow and even and entirely untroubled. Not the 3-count pause, not the shallow fighting quality of illness. Full, regular breathing. The breathing of a healthy person in deep sleep. The quality of life. You can hear it. The camera can find it. Mr. Aldridge sets up with a speed and silence you've come to recognize as his best work. Not hurried, but efficient. Every movement purposeful. The tripod legs placed without scraping. The camera seated without the usual small adjustments and readjustments. He focuses. under the cloth, 20 seconds, 30, and when he emerges he looks at you with a small nod that means, good. You pass him the first plate holder, the exposure. 15 seconds. You count with him, watching his hand on the lens cap, the careful raising and replacing of it. The room holds its breath. Miss Ashworth does not move. She doesn't move because she's genuinely asleep, not arranged, not composed, not the careful positioning of Mrs. Hartley's preparations, not the laudanum stillness of Mr. Hartley. This is a person asleep in their own bed at a time they would normally be asleep, and the only unusual element is the two men with a camera standing in her room, and she is so unconscious of that it might as well not be true. The second plate, third, fourth. By the fourth exposure, Mr. Aldridge is using a slightly longer aperture to bring in the last of the morning light from a difficult angle, and the exposure runs to 20 seconds. And somewhere in those 20 seconds Miss Ashworth shifts. A small movement. The hand that was under the pillow moves just slightly, the fingers uncurling and then curling again. A dreamer's movement, something happening in the interior landscape of her sleep that has produced this small outward signal. Mr. Aldridge replaces the lens cap, looks at you. 5th plate, he mouths. The 5th exposure is the one. You know this before you develop it, the same way you sometimes know when a portrait sitting has produced the image it needed to, a quality of rightness in the air. The light has moved as the morning has progressed, coming now at a slightly sharper angle, catching the line of Miss Ashworth's cheekbone and the curve of her shoulder and the white of the pillow in a way that makes the image already, before the chemistry, already a composition. Her face is turned more toward the camera. She has moved again in the interval between the 4th and 5th exposures. Another small dreamer movement, this time toward the light, and the result is that the lens can see her more fully now. The hand that was beneath the pillow is now resting on the coverlet. Her fingers are slightly open. 20 seconds. You count with Mr. Aldridge. The room is so quiet. The Belgrave Square, morning outside the window, the grey winter light, Miss Ashworth's breathing slow and full, the held breath of the two of you trying not to be present, trying to be invisible, trying to make the room behave as though no one is here. The lens cap goes back. Mr. Aldridge straightens up, looks at the room once more. A last look. A look you've seen him give sick rooms and parlours and studios. A look that is not quite an assessment and not quite a farewell. Something between. You pack the equipment. In the corridor, the maid is waiting. She looks at you with an expression you recognise. She has been standing there for 40 minutes, listening to the near silence of the room, and she has been afraid in the way that people in service are afraid, specifically, practically for the consequences. What if he wakes her? What if something goes wrong? What if the thing she was told to allow turns out to be something she should have stopped? It went well, Mr. Aldridge tells her quietly. She didn't wake. The maid lets out a breath. She'll sleep another hour, probably, Mr. Aldridge says. Don't disturb her. The maid nods. Her expression doesn't entirely change, but something in it relaxes. You carry the equipment downstairs and out into Belgrave Square. The November morning is clear and cold, the sky a pale blue over the rooftops, the plane trees bare against it. A woman is walking a small dog on the far side of the square, the dog investigating the base of every tree with the systematic dedication of someone conducting an audit. 5 good plates, Mr. Aldridge says. I think the 5th. Yes. He picks up his end of the case. We'll see in the dark. You see in the dark that evening. The fifth plate is what you thought it was. Miss Ashworth's face turned 3/4 toward the camera, the morning light on her cheekbone, the open hand on the coverlet. Her expression is, it is the only word, undefended. It is not peaceful, exactly. Not arranged. It is the face of someone who has let everything go for the duration of sleep, who has released the performance that the drawing room and the confident handshake and the precise articulate speech all required, and what remains is something more than peaceful, more complex, a face that is thinking somehow, even in unconsciousness, processing something, dreaming something, less performed. That was Mr. Aldridge's phrase about the death portraits. Less performed. She was right. She looked exactly right about this. The sleeping face is less performed than the waking face, and what is revealed when the performance stops is not an absence, but a presence of a different kind, more inward, more true to whatever the person actually is when nobody, including the person themselves, is watching. You hold the plate up to the lamp and look at her face and think, this is what she wanted to see, and she will see it, because you captured it. 20 seconds of the correct morning light and the chemistry will give her this, and she will look at it and see herself without the performance, and whether or not that turns out to be the thing she expected, she will have it. Permanently. Fixed. You place the plate in the mounting solution and let the chemistry finish its work. That night, lying on your rope mattress with the city making its 11 o'clock sounds outside, you think about the day, about the 5 plates in their holders, about the 5th one with the open hand and the undefended face, about the difference between what Miss Ashworth wanted and what Mrs. Hartley wanted, and what the father of the 9-year-old wanted, and what all the clients you've had in the 4 months since you arrived have wanted in one form or another from the photograph. They all want the same thing, in different languages. They want to keep something that is going to be lost. Mrs. Hartley wanted to keep her husband's face against the certain future in which she would not have it. The father wanted to keep his son's childhood face before the child grew out of it. Miss Ashworth wants to keep her own unperformed face, the face that exists when she is not there to shape it, because she knows that this face is real, and that reality is precisely the thing performance will not give you. The dead woman in the first developing tray, the woman who looked asleep, her husband wanted to keep the face of someone who looked peaceful, because the truth of how she died was not something he could frame and put on a mantelpiece and look at in the mornings. You wanted to learn a trade. You thought you were coming to London to learn chemistry and optics and the handling of glass plates in the dark. You are learning those things. But what you're also learning, what the work is teaching you day by day in a language that has no direct words, is this. Photography is not the technology. The technology is the means. What photography is, in its deepest function, in the reason people actually pay for it and commission it, and are afraid of it and want it for their sleeping husbands and their dying wives and their moving children and themselves. What photography is, fundamentally, is a way of holding on. People are terrified of losing things. They are terrified of losing the faces of the people they love, and of the ways those faces look in particular moments, in sleep, in illness, in the ordinary light of a Tuesday morning before anything important has happened yet. They're terrified of losing their own faces, their own unguarded expressions, the truth of how they look when no one is looking. They are terrified of death, and of its closeness to sleep, and of the way the camera makes both visible, makes both permanent, makes both something you can hold in your hands. The fear of the sleeping photograph is the fear of death wearing sleep's face. It is the fear of vulnerability, of the unguarded self being captured without permission. It is the fear that what the camera takes might be real, might be something you needed, might leave you with less of yourself than you had before. And the desire for the sleeping photograph is exactly the same fear turned inside out. The same fear, different response to it. You close your eyes, the city makes its sounds, a door, a horse, voices somewhere below, the pub on the corner conducting its late business, glasses and laughter and the low thunder of many conversations happening at once. The cat on the courtyard wall, which you've come to think of as a fixed feature of the landscape rather than an event, is doing its 3 a.m. screaming, which will last approximately 10 minutes and then stop and then resume unpredictably. You think of the 5th plate, Miss Ashworth's open hand. You think of Mr. Hartley's hands on the coverlet. The same gesture, different meaning. Sleep looks like death. Death looks like sleep. And life looks like everything in between. Captured in 20 seconds of available light by a box of glass and brass and the chemistry of silver salts, held against the dark, fixed. You sleep. December arrives in London the way December always arrives in London, quietly at first and then all at once. The coal smoke thickens as the weather drops. The whole city burning more fuel against the cold, the smoke combining with the river fog to produce the particular atmospheric condition that Londoners simply call the murk, a brownish yellow dimness that sits over everything and makes midday look like 4 in the afternoon, and 4 in the afternoon look like night. You develop the Ashworth portraits in this light, or in the absence of it, the red darkroom lamp which is immune to the weather outside, and when you bring the prints out into the studio to examine them in daylight, the daylight through the Baker Street windows is so compromised by the murk that you have to tilt the prints toward the lamp anyway. The 5th print, you look at it for a long time. You look at Miss Ashworth comes to collect on a Wednesday, not sending the maid but coming in person, which is unusual. Most clients of this class send servants for the collection, arriving themselves only for the initial commission and the final approval. She arrives at 3 o'clock, which is the murk's dimmest hour, and the studio in that light is very quiet, very still, the December dark pressing against the windows. She looks at the prints in order, 1st through 4th. She examines each one carefully, holding it at the same distance, tilting it slightly. Her face during this examination is very close to her sleeping face, you notice. Not identical. She's here, awake, self-aware. She's performing, but closer to the undefended state than she was in the drawing room. Concentrated, absorbed. She reaches the 5th print. She holds it for a long time, longer than the others. Her expression changes, not dramatically, not in a way you could describe easily, but something shifts behind her ears. "This one," she says. "Yes," Mr. Aldridge says. "How did you... What was the light doing when you took this?" "The morning had moved," Mr. Aldridge says, "between the 4th and 5th exposure. A quarter of an hour, approximately. The angle changed." She nods slowly. She's still looking at the print. "I look different than I expected," she says. "Different how?" I thought without the performance it would be simpler. That without the self-awareness it would be, I don't know, plainer." She looks at the print. "This isn't plainer. This is more. This is..." She stops, tries again. "I look as though something is happening, as though I'm in the middle of something." "You were," you say. She looks at you. "Dreaming," you say. "You moved between the 4th and 5th exposure. Your hand." And your face changed. We could see it through the lens. She looks at the print again, the open hand on the coverlet. I don't remember what I was dreaming, she says. You wouldn't. No. She puts the print down, picks it up again, puts it down. I'll take 2 copies of this one, she says, and one of the second. Mr. Aldridge, may I ask you to hold the plates, not destroy them? I may want more copies, or I may want to study them. Of course, Mr. Aldridge says. She takes the prints, wrapped in brown paper, and she leaves, and you watch from the studio window as she gets into the cab on Baker Street, and the cab joins the murk, slow traffic of the December afternoon, and then she's gone. Well, Mr. Aldridge says. He goes into the office and pours tea from the pot that's been sitting on the stove since noon, which means it is strong and slightly bitter, and you drink it anyway because December and the chemicals and the murk require something hot. She'll write something about it, he says, the paper she mentioned. Will it say anything good about the studio? Probably not about the studio specifically, about the practice. He sets down his cup. About what the sleeping photograph reveals. He looks at you. What do you think it reveals? You think of the 5th plate, the open hand, the expression that was more, not less. The self, you say. Or a self. The self that is there when the performed self isn't. You turn your own cup in your hands. I don't know if that's the real self. I don't know if it's more true than the waking self, but it's different. It's a different layer. Mr. Aldridge nods. He picks up his cup, finishes it, puts it down. That, he says, is what we should be afraid of. You wait. Not the camera taking something, he says, but the photograph showing something. The sleeping face shows a layer of the person they've never seen. Something they didn't choose to show. Something that was never meant to be visible. He straightens the papers on his desk. The fear isn't about the camera taking a soul. The fear is about being known, being seen in a way you didn't agree to. He goes back to his ledger. You stand in the studio with your cooling tea and the murk pressing against the windows, and the prints in their mounting boards, and the plates in their holders, and the whole archive of faces that this studio has been building year by year, this collection of moments made permanent. And you think about what he just said, and you think it is true, and you think also that it doesn't fully account for the fear, that there is something else in it, something that has to do not with being seen, but with the boundary between sleep and death, with the way the Victorians lived so close to that boundary, with the way every house in London in December 1878 contains someone who has been lost and is being mourned, and whose face is slowly becoming unreachable. The fear of the sleeping photograph is partly the fear of being known without consent, but it is also underneath that the fear of the thing the sleeping photograph resembles, the thing it has always resembled, the thing that is waiting for all of them, for all of you, for everyone who commissions portraits and death portraits and sleeping portraits, and who sits in studios with their best clothes on and their best expressions prepared, trying to get the image right, trying to be preserved correctly, trying to leave something behind. You will think about this a great deal more before the winter is done. The second week of December brings the first real cold, the cold that makes the thermometer drop below freezing at night and barely recovers by noon. The cold that makes the ice on your washing basin not a thin skin but a genuine layer, requiring genuine effort to break. You break it with your elbow now, having learned that the knuckles are too useful to keep bruising. November's note on the window frame, December. There is a gap in the wall behind the washstand where the wind comes through. You have found the extra blanket. You have stuffed the gap with newspaper. The newspaper lasts approximately 3 days before the wind finds the edges and begins to work them loose, and you restuff it. And this becomes a December ritual. Every 3 days, new newspaper in the gap. Your hands are very dry now. The lanolin helps but doesn't fully solve the problem, and the chemical immersion of the daily developing work has begun to make the knuckles of your right hand split open slightly. Small, shallow cracks that sting when you plunge your hands into the baths and sting differently. A background, constant sting. The rest of the time. You put lanolin on them morning and evening. You learn to work with your hands at a certain angle that reduces the immersion time. You learn that cold water is worse than room temperature water for the skin, which means that in December the first job of every developing session is to bring the baths up to a temperature that is at least not hostile. You are learning the specific knowledge of winter in a dark room, the knowledge that accumulates in the body rather than the mind, that rewrites your habits and your automatic responses, that teaches you things you couldn't have learned any other way. One evening in the second week of December, Mr. Aldridge comes to find you in the dark room. This is not unusual now. He comes more often since the conversation about the Hartley case, since the Ashworth sitting, since whatever shift has happened in the air between employer and apprentice. He stands in the doorway in the red light and watches you work, and sometimes says something and sometimes doesn't. Tonight he says something. "I had a request today," he says, "from a physician in Marylebone, a Dr. Ellison. He works with patients who suffer from sleep disturbances, specifically from a condition where patients act out in their sleep, move, speak, sometimes become violent. He wants photographs taken of his patients during these episodes." You stop working. "During," you say. "During. At night." In the ward of the private clinic he runs off Wimpole Street. He believes the photographs would be scientifically useful, that they would allow him to study the facial expressions and physical states that occur during the episodes and compare them between patients. The bath is very cold under your hands and the chemical smell in the red light is very strong. He wants us to photograph sleeping people at night, you say. In a clinic. In a clinic, yes, with the knowledge and consent of the patients or their families. This is not what Mrs. Hartley arranged. The patients know they will be photographed, or their families consent on their behalf, in cases where the patients are not capable of consenting directly. You think about this. What kind of not capable? Some are severely afflicted, Mr. Aldridge says carefully. Dr. Ellison described cases of somnambulism, of night terrors so severe the patient is not recovered in the morning, of a kind of sleep fit, he called it, where the patient convulses in their sleep. A pause. He has one patient who speaks in voices, different voices, during sleep. He believes this is medically significant. The red lamp makes everything the colour of old blood. And the photographs would document the states, Mr. Aldridge says, provide a scientific record. He's a serious man, Ellison. I checked his publications. He's written on the subject of sleep pathology in 2 journals. You look at the tray. The image in it is an ordinary portrait, a family from St. John's Wood, unrelated to any of this, coming up normally in the developer. When does he want us to come? He proposed a Thursday, next week. At night. At night. Yes. You think of the post-mortem sittings, the sick rooms, the carefully arranged stillness of people who have passed the boundary of sleep entirely. You think of Miss Ashworth's undefended face, the open hand, the dreaming expression that was more, not less. You think of patients in a clinical ward, people who thrash in their sleep, who speak in other voices, who fit and convulse while their bodies are supposed to be at rest. Sleeping people who are not at peace. Sleeping people for whom sleep is not the small comfortable death but something else. Something that has gone wrong in the crossing. Something that has caught between the two states and can't resolve. I'll do it, you say. Mr. Aldridge nods. He goes back to the office. You transfer the portrait to the stop bath. The family from St. John's Wood freezes in the chemistry. Their ordinary, composed, Sunday-best faces, arranged and still. Outside the dark room, outside the studio, outside Baker Street, December. London is doing its December things, selling Christmas goods and burning coal and filling the gin palaces and clearing the cold streets at 10 o'clock and leaving the night to the watch and the link boys and the people who have nowhere to go. Next Thursday, you will take a camera into a clinic on Wimpole Street and photograph people sleeping in states that their waking selves do not remember and may not know about, and the results will be, what? Scientific, useful, true, the fear of being known without consent, the camera showing something the subject didn't choose to show. Dr. Ellison's patients will consent. Their families will consent. But consent, you're beginning to understand, is not the same as choosing. You can agree to be photographed and still not choose the face that is captured. You can give permission for the camera to be present and still not control what it finds. The portrait family from St. John's Wood looks up at you from the fixing bath. 5 faces, arranged correctly, performing correctly. None of them look like themselves in sleep. None of us do. The Thursday night arrives cold enough to see every breath as its own small weather system. You and Mr. Aldridge meet at Baker Street at 8 o'clock, load the equipment into the cab he's hired, and rattle through the December streets toward Wimpole Street, which is not far in distance but feels far in the particular way of London at night in winter, when the familiar streets lose their daytime logic and become something more ambiguous. The cab smells of horse and the previous occupants, and the straw on the floor which is doing its best against the cold and not managing. You sit with a plate case on your lap because there's no room for it anywhere else. The weight of it familiar through your thighs, the glass plates inside it each wrapped in their black cloth like small secrets. 6 plates for 6 photographs. Dr. Ellison has specified 6 subjects. Mr. Aldridge is quiet in the way that is different from his usual quietness. Not the considered silence of a man thinking, but something more careful, reserved. "Have you done this before?" you ask. "Night work, in a clinical setting?" "Once," he says. 7 years ago. A different physician. Patients at Bethlehem. Bethlehem. Bedlam. The oldest psychiatric institution in London, in the world probably. Its name so synonymous with chaos and madness that chaos and madness have borrowed it. What was that like? He's quiet for a moment. The cab jolts over something in the road. Cobbles disrupted by the frost probably. The city constantly fighting the winter from below. "Sad," he says, and then nothing more. You arrive at Wimpole Street at 8:40. The clinic is in a townhouse that looks, from the street, like every other townhouse on Wimpole Street. Wide, well-maintained, gaslit entrance, iron railings. The sign beside the door is small and discreet. Dr. T.H. Ellison, physician. Specialist in disorders of sleep and nervous function. The letters small enough that you'd miss them if you weren't looking. Dr. Ellison answers the door himself. He is not what you expected, which in 4 months in London you've come to recognise as a consistent feature of London. The people are never quite what the letters suggest. He is younger than his publications implied, 40 perhaps, with an open, tired face and the particular quality of exhaustion that comes from night work, from being awake while his patients sleep. He is dressed formally, a good suit, though the jacket has a small ink stain on the left cuff that he doesn't seem aware of. His handshake is firm and quick. "Thank you for coming," he says. "Please come through." The entrance hall smells of, you identify the elements as you cross it, carbolic, which is everywhere in medical establishments, and something underlying it that is harder to name, something that might be the accumulated breathing of people under stress, the particular atmospheric quality of a space that holds suffering, not unpleasant, not like the sickroom smell, more neutral than that, clinical, which is the word, and the word is the right one. He leads you through to the back of the house, past a waiting room that is empty at this hour, and a consulting room where the lamp is turned low, to a corridor, and then to a staircase going down. The ward is in the basement. This surprises you. You expected, you're not sure what you expected. Something hospital-like, wards with rows of beds, nurses moving in the gaslight. What you find instead is a series of smaller rooms, each with one or two beds, each with its own small window at the ceiling where the glow of the street comes in at ankle height from outside. 6 rooms, 6 patients. The gas turned to a low, steady glow throughout. Not darkness, not full light. The specific illumination of a space that needs to be both restful and monitored. There is a nurse, a woman in her 30s, in the dark dress and white apron and cap of her profession, who looks at you and Mr. Aldridge with the expression of someone who has decided to be professionally accepting of an unusual situation, because the physician has sanctioned it, and therefore it is not her concern. She does not smile. She nods. She will stay present, Dr. Ellison explains, throughout the session. The patient's welfare is her responsibility. You and Mr. Aldridge are to do your work without interfering with her work. "Who are the 6? Mr. Aldridge asks. Dr. Ellison has a folder. He opens it and reads, "A woman of 43 who suffers from recurrent night terrors, screaming episodes whose family has consented. A man of 30 who sleepwalks has been found 3 streets from his home in the mornings with no memory of leaving. A girl of 17 with what Ellison calls somniloquy, sleep-talking that is extensive and coherent, and which the girl has no recall of when awake. 2 patients with what he describes as the sleep fit, the convulsive episodes. And the 6th, the one who speaks in different voices." He pauses at the 6th. "Mr. Kavanagh," he says, "he is unusual. I want to be direct with you about that. He is not violent. He has been in my care for 2 years. But his sleep state is, as I said in my letter, unusual." "The voices," Mr. Aldridge says. "The voices, yes. And other things. His face during the episodes is very mobile. It changes, more than you would expect from ordinary dreaming. I believe, and this is the scientific hypothesis I am trying to document, I believe his is a case of what I am calling divided consciousness, where the sleeping mind hosts what are functionally different persons, different identities, and that these persons express themselves physically in ways the waking Kavanagh does not, in ways he is incapable of. The basement is very quiet, very still. The gas lamps burn steadily. Behind the closed doors of the 6 rooms, 6 people are sleeping or are trying to sleep or are between the states. "Why photographs?" Mr. Aldridge says. "Because memory is unreliable," Ellison says, "and because description is inadequate. I have written accounts of what I witness in these rooms at night. They are insufficient. A written description of a face expressing something is not the same as the face. I need the face. He looks at you both. These patients have given, through themselves or their families, permission. They know photographs may be taken. They've been told it is for medical research, that it will not be published without further consent. He closes the folder. I believe the photographs will change how medicine understands sleep, how it understands the boundary between sleeping and waking, between the person who falls asleep and the person who inhabits the body while it's asleep. He opens the first door. The woman of 43 is asleep in a narrow bed. Her face, in the low gaslight, is nothing. Calm, composed. The night terror has not arrived yet, or has not arrived tonight. She looks like what she is. A middle-aged woman sleeping in a strange room. Nothing remarkable. Nothing that would explain the screaming that apparently wakes the whole clinic on 3 or 4 nights per week. You set up the equipment. Mr. Aldridge focuses. The exposure. 12 seconds, because the available light in the basement is even less than the Hartley sick room, and you're working at the edge of what the plates can do. The image may be imperfect, but it will be something. First plate. The sleeping face. Nothing unusual. Second room. The sleepwalker. A lean young man, early 30s, lying on his back with his arms at his sides in a position so formally straight it looks arranged. His face is slightly troubled, not distressed, but with a tension in the jaw that the sleeping face usually doesn't carry, as if his body is already preparing for the walking, already receiving some instruction. You watch him while Mr. Aldridge focuses. The stillness of him is different from ordinary sleeping stillness. More alert somehow, in a way that makes no sense because he's clearly deeply unconscious. But something in the set of his shoulders is ready, waiting. Does he know he's been found on the street? You ask quietly. He has been told, Ellison says, equally quiet. He doesn't believe it. He says he has never left his room in sleep. The people who have found him are mistaken. The exposure. 12 seconds. You look at the image afterward in a way you usually say for the developing stage, imagining what the plate is holding, what the chemistry will reveal. The straight arms, the jaw, the waiting quality of a body whose sleeping mind has other plans. Third room. The girl who talks in sleep. She is 17, which you know from the folder, but she looks younger in sleep, smaller, the specific smallness of the young who haven't fully claimed their adult size yet. She's lying on her side, and even as you arrange the equipment you can hear it. A low sound, rhythmic, not clearly words from this distance. As you get closer than you would normally stand to a sleeping subject, closer than the camera work requires, but Ellison gestures you forward, wants you to hear. As you get closer, the low sound resolves into speech. She is talking, not dreaming murmurs, not the shapeless vocalizations of ordinary sleep speech. She is talking in a low, steady voice, and the words are organized. They have grammar, they have meaning. You catch phrases, something about a garden, something that sounds like a name, a complete sentence that you lose the beginning of but whose end is perfectly clear, she says, in a girl's voice, in a voice that is hers and not quite hers, and none of them knew. The room is very cold. Mr. Aldridge takes the exposure. You watch the girl's face during the 12 seconds. Her lips continue to move slightly, even as the rest of her stays still enough for the plate. The sleeping speech doesn't stop for the camera. The camera is not part of her world. She is somewhere else entirely, saying things to someone who isn't in this room, saying things that may not be meant for any living person at all. And none of them knew. You move. 4th room, 5th room, the 2 patients with the sleep fits. Both are currently in an interlude of ordinary sleep, which Ellison tells you is normal. The episodes come in clusters and then stop for days. You photograph them in their ordinary sleep, documenting what Ellison calls the baseline, the face before the disturbance. 2 more plates, 2 more sleeping strangers, 6th room, Mr. Kavanagh. Dr. Ellison pauses outside the door for a moment. He doesn't reach for the handle immediately. He stands there in the corridor with a folder under his arm and his hand at his side and his tired face doing something you can't quite interpret. Not apprehension, not quite. Something more like respect. He may be in an episode, Ellison says. I want to prepare you. Prepare us for what specifically? Mr. Aldridge says. His face will look different than his ordinary face. Very different. If he is in a voice episode, you will hear him speaking. The voice will not sound like his voice. It will not sound like a man his age. It may sound... Ellison pauses, choosing the word carefully. Younger, or older, or in some registers female. Do not be alarmed. The clinical explanation is clear to me, even if it is not yet clear in the literature. He is not, he pauses again, possessed. He is ill. It is medical condition. He says this in a way that suggests the clarification has been necessary before. He opens the door. The room is warmer than the others, not dramatically but noticeable, a degree or two. The difference between cold and cold plus person who has been generating heat in a small room for hours. The gas lamp is turned slightly higher than in the other rooms, and in its light you can see the man in the bed. He is perhaps 50, large-framed, even lying down, even diminished by the narrow clinic bed and the white hospital linen. He has the structure of a large man. His face is broad, heavy-jawed, the face of someone accustomed to physical work or at least built for it. His hands on the coverlet are large and still, and his face is doing something that takes a moment to process. It is moving, not dramatically, not the convulsive distortion of a fit, not the gross expression of theatrical pain. Something subtler. The muscles around his eyes are shifting slightly. The set of his mouth is changing, almost imperceptibly, and then changing again, as if the face is being asked to accommodate expressions that are slightly different from the ones it usually produces, as if something is wearing the face and not quite sure how it fits. He makes a sound, a soft sound, high, clear, the beginning of a word in a voice that is entirely unlike the physical architecture of the man producing it. A young voice, a woman's voice, or a child's, you can't tell which, something in between. The nurse makes a small movement near the door, not toward him, just a small preparatory shift. It's all right, Ellison says quietly, to you as much as to her. You set up the tripod with your hands performing the automatic steps while your attention stays on the man in the bed. The face continues its slow, incremental reconfiguration. The voice comes again. Not words, just sound, something searching for a word it can't quite find in this borrowed throat. The large hands on the coverlet remain entirely still. Mr. Aldridge is under the focusing cloth. He stays there longer than usual. When he emerges, he looks at you with an expression you have not seen on his face before. In 4 months of working with him through sick rooms and parlours and studios, and the Covent Garden venue at midnight, and Miss Ashworth's bedroom with its north window. The expression is, I don't know what I'm looking at. And the expression is, I'm going to do the work anyway. He holds out his hand for the plate holder. The exposure, 12 seconds. You count. During the 12 seconds, Mr. Kavanagh's face does this. It settles. Not into peace, not into the undefended quality of Miss Ashworth's sleeping face, not into the laudanum calm of Mr. Hartley. It settles into something that is not the man's ordinary face, and is not a distressed face, and is not an expression you have seen before on any sleeping subject you have photographed. It is an expression of interiority, of deep, concentrated presence somewhere other than here, as if whoever or whatever is using the body right now is so focused on wherever they are that the body is simply being maintained, kept running on the minimum necessary, the face a barely tended thing left in a room where the real action isn't happening. The 12 seconds end. Mr. Aldridge replaces the lens cap, steps back from the camera, looks at the man in the bed, the voice again, clearer now, still not words but approaching them, the specific approach of a word that is just at the edge of audibility. And then the word itself, and the word is not English, and the language it might be you cannot identify, and it says nothing to you, and it hangs in the air of the small warm room for a moment, and then there is silence. Mr. Kavanagh's large chest rises and falls, rises and falls. His face slowly, incrementally, returns to something more like his own face. You disassemble the tripod in silence. In the corridor, Dr. Ellison closes the 6th door and stands for a moment. Then he says, 6 exposures, more than I hoped for tonight. We should develop these before we talk about what they show, Mr. Aldridge says. Of course. Ellison looks at him. Have you, in your experience, have you encountered this before? What you saw in there? No, Mr. Aldridge says. Simply, cleanly, no elaboration. The cab ride back to Baker Street takes 20 minutes in the December cold and is almost entirely silent. You sit with a plate case on your lap and the 6 plates inside it wrapped in their black cloth, and you do not think about the girl in the 3rd room saying, and none of them knew, and you do not think about Mr. Kavanagh's face in the last seconds before the exposure, and you do not think about the word in the unidentifiable language hanging in the warm air of the 6th room. You think about chemistry. You think about what the developer will reveal. You think about the 12-second exposures in the low gaslight and whether the plates have caught enough, or whether the images will come up thin, underexposed, the face is barely legible in the chemistry. Practical thoughts, technical thoughts, the thoughts that keep you in this room and not in the one you just left. The plates develop the next morning. You do this work alone. Mr. Aldridge has a client at 9 and sends you to the darkroom with instructions to develop all 6 and report when done. You prepare the baths, the red lamp, the cold but not hostile temperature of the developer. You put on your chemical apron and roll your sleeves and begin. The first 5 are what you expected. The underexposure is there but manageable, the face is visible, the sleeping expressions readable if not sharp. The woman of 43 in her ordinary sleep, the sleepwalker's prepared stillness, the girl with her moving lips, captured mid-word in a way that will be visible in the print, the blur of the lips, the rest of the face still, the specific evidence of the speaking, the 2 baseline sleepers, the 6th. You lower the plate into the developer and you wait. The image comes up slowly. The low-light exposure means the chemistry has to work harder, the silver grains building the image from less information, the face emerging more gradually than the others. You watch the tray, the white of the linen first, the dark of the background wall, then the large hands on the coverlet, then the shoulders, then the face. You look at it for a long time without moving it to the stop bath. Longer than you should. The developer can over-process if you leave the plate too long, but you leave it watching the face, and the face does not over-process. It is exactly what you caught in the 12 seconds of the exposure. The face in its unsettled configuration. The muscles around the eyes not entirely the man's own. The expression of concentrated interiority. But also this. The expression is not frightening. Looking at it in the red dark of the developing room, in the cold chemistry, in the silence of Baker Street at 9:15 in the morning, you look at Mr. Kavanagh's face on the plate, and you feel not the cold of the sixth room, not the strangeness of the voice, not the theoretical weight of what Ellison calls divided consciousness. You feel something else. The face is not frightening because it is, underneath the strangeness, underneath the reconfigured muscles and the borrowed expression, still a face, still a human face, with all the universal grammar of the human face, the eyes and the jaw and the particular vulnerability of the sleeping brow, still a person, still someone's body, being managed in sleep by something it is not entirely clear what, but managed, kept safe, the breathing maintained, the large hands on the coverlet perfectly still, perfectly careful. Whoever is in the sixth room when Mr. Kavanagh sleeps, they are not cruel to his body. You transfer the plate to the stop bath. That thought stays with you all morning. Through the developing and the fixing and the mounting and the assessment of all 6 plates, and the notation of the ones that are usable for Ellison's purposes and the ones that are too underexposed to serve, you write it down in the notebook you've started keeping. Not a formal record, Mr. Aldridge keeps those, but a personal one, a habit you've developed of writing down the things that occur to you in the darkroom that the rest of the day won't have room for. December 14th. Wimpole Street plates developed. 6 subjects, 5 usable. Kavanagh plate fully usable, best of the 6. Something in the expression that is easier to see in the chemistry than in the room itself. In the room I was too aware of the strangeness of it. In the image the strangeness recedes, and what's left is just a face. A face doing unusual things, but a face. You think, this is what photographs do. They remove the strangeness. They take an event and they fix it in the grammar of image, and the grammar of image is calmer than the grammar of being present. Things look different in photographs than they look in life. Not less real, different real. The fear of being photographed sleeping, the fear of how the image will look, the fear that the sleeping face fixed in image will reveal something that the waking face can deny. Miss Ashworth's face in the 5th plate. More, not less. Mr. Kavanagh's face in the 6th plate. Strange, but not frightening. The camera's version of truth is always a different truth from the room's version. Both true, neither complete. Mr. Aldridge comes to the darkroom at 11 with a cup of tea for you, which is new. He does not usually bring you tea. He looks at the Ellison prints laid out on the drying rack, and he looks at them for a long time without speaking, going through them in order, the way he went through the Ashworth prints, carefully, systematically, tilting each one to the light. He reaches the Kavanagh print last. He holds it for a very long time. "Good work," he says finally. "The light was difficult." "Yes," he sets the print down. "I'm going to send these to Ellison with the note about the exposures and what we'd need to improve the light for future sessions. He'll want to do this again." "Will we do it again?" Mr. Aldridge looks at you. The question sounds more uncertain than you intended. More personal. "Do you want to?" he says. You think about the 6 rooms, the woman whose night terror hadn't come that night, the sleepwalker with his prepared stillness, the girl saying, and none of them knew. Mr. Kavanagh's slow, reconfigured face, and the word in the language you couldn't name. "Yes," you say, he nods, takes his tea back to the office. You look at the Kavanagh print on the drying rack and you think about the nature of sleep, which is what you've been thinking about in various forums for 4 months now, from every angle the work has given you. You think about what sleep is, what it actually is, not in the superstitious framework of the Victorians, and not in the medical framework of Ellison, but in the plain practical experiential framework of a person who sleeps every night and knows what it's like from the inside. Sleep is departure. That much is true. You leave the room every night. You leave your body to manage itself without you, to breathe and maintain and keep the heart going, and you go somewhere else. And the somewhere else is not available to memory when you return, mostly. The dreams that stick are fragments. Most of what happens in sleep happens in a place that has no report to send back. The Victorians call it a small death, and they're not entirely wrong. The person who wakes up is most of the person who fell asleep, but the gap in between is genuine. There is a gap. There is a real sense in which you are not there, and the body carries on without you, and the camera, if someone has pointed a camera at you in the gap, the camera has recorded something that is yours but that you did not choose to produce. Your face without your participation, your body's version of you, the body's maintenance of you while the real you is elsewhere. That is the fear, not superstition, not soul capture, just the plain fact of not being there when the image is made, the intimacy of it, the exposure of it, the photograph that shows the face that you make when you're not making faces, when the face is only being maintained and not performed, the face that is the body's face, the face that exists when the person is somewhere else. You understand Mrs. Hartley now in a way you didn't 4 months ago. You understand the father and the 9-year-old boy and the soprano from the Covent Garden supper room, and Miss Ashworth, and even, in a different key, Mr. Kavanagh, who cannot consent in the ordinary way because the self that would consent is not present when the photographs need to be taken. All of them. The whole spectrum of people who have been photographed sleeping, or who fear being photographed sleeping, or who have commissioned the photographs of sleeping others, all of them in some relation to the same fact. The gap, the small death, the genuine absence of the self from the body's overnight maintenance, and the photograph says, "I was here, even when you weren't. I found what was left." The December light through the small dark room window. There is a small window. You're not in a broom cupboard anymore. Mr. Aldridge moved you to the proper dark room 3 months ago when you demonstrated you could be trusted with the good plates. The December light is doing its murk-dimmed best. Baker Street outside. Someone's feet passing at eye level from where you stand. The bottoms of coats, the iron-cold cobbles. You wash your hands, the sting of the cracks on your knuckles. You put on your working coat and you go upstairs to help with the 11 o'clock sitting. Christmas comes to Baker Street the way it comes to every commercial street in London. Commercially. The shop across the road puts red berries in its window. The baker 2 doors down starts producing something that smells specifically of cinnamon every morning from about the 7th of December onward, and the smell of it reaches you when you open the studio for the morning and reminds you with a physical specificity of Christmases in Britford, of your mother's kitchen, of the particular weight of December when you were a child, and the whole world seemed to be arranging itself into something meaningful. London's Christmas is louder, fuller, more. The street vendors add seasonal goods to their repertoires: holly, oranges, paper decorations. The toy sellers appear in greater numbers. The organ grinders play carols alongside their usual repertoire. The carols slightly mechanical in the way that everything played by an organ grinder sounds slightly mechanical. The music correct, but the feeling not quite. The portrait business increases in December. Families who want their portrait taken before the year ends, who want an image of how they look this Christmas to set against how they will look next Christmas, to give as gifts, to send to relatives in the country or in places further. You take portraits every day. You develop every night. The studio's perpetually in motion, the professional cheerful machinery of it turning at its December pace, and Mr. Aldridge moves through it with his usual precise calm, and you move through it slightly less precisely and slightly less calmly, but you think, improving. You are improving. This is a fact that you notice with some surprise, not having expected the improvement to be so tangible, so physical. Your hands in the darkroom are faster, more certain, less thought required for each stage of the process. The thought has moved from your mind down into your hands, into the muscle memory that lives below decision, the kind of knowledge you can demonstrate without being able to explain, that operates correctly even when you're tired or distracted or thinking about something else. Mr. Aldridge notices. He says nothing direct. He's not a man for direct praise, you've established this, but he gives you more independent work. Sends you to collect equipment from the supplier on Regent Street alone. Lets you do the preliminary setup for portrait sittings before he arrives. Once, on a busy Thursday, lets you take a complete portrait sitting without supervision. A young couple, engaged, wanting a formal portrait before the wedding. You do it. The images come out well. He looks at them and makes the small nod that means adequate. Adequate from Mr. Aldridge's progress. The second visit to Dr. Ellison's clinic happens in the third week of January. A new year, 1879. You've been in London 5 months. The winter has settled in properly. The kind of cold that has stopped being temporary and started being structural. The cold that is simply the way things are now. The gap in the wall behind your washstand has been re-newspapered twice. The extra blanket is pulling its weight. The January session at Ellison's clinic is different from the December session because you've improved the equipment. Ellison has installed additional gas lamps in several rooms on Mr. Aldridge's recommendation to increase the available light. The exposures can be 8 seconds now instead of 12. The sharpness of the images will be better. The faces will be more visible. They are. The girl in room 3 is talking again. This time you're close enough, with the increased light making the session less rushed to actually hear the words. You hear them while you're loading the second plate, and Ellison is standing near the door with his notebook open, recording everything, his pencil moving constantly. The girl says, "I don't want to go down there." Then silence. Then, "It's cold." Then something you can't catch. Then, "He doesn't know I'm here." Her voice is low and conversational. She is speaking to someone, or the part of her that is doing the speaking is speaking to someone in a space that has rules and geography and people in it, a complete world that has assembled itself in the hours of her sleep, that operates with full internal consistency, that has a cold place somewhere down there, and a person who doesn't know she's there. He doesn't know I'm here. The exposure. 8 seconds of the moving lips, the still face, the words forming in the low gas light of a January basement in London. You carry that phrase home with you. He doesn't know I'm here. The dream self in some dream place, aware of being invisible, aware of presence without knowledge, the feeling of being in a room where no one can see you. The camera's relationship to the sleeping subject is exactly this. The sleeping subject does not know the camera is there. The camera is the observer in the room that the sleeper can't see. He doesn't know I'm here. Except here the camera is the he. The camera is the presence that the sleeping person doesn't know about, the witness without the subject's awareness, the I in the room that no one invited. You write this in your notebook that night. You're writing in your notebook most nights now, in the hour before sleep when London is doing its 11 o'clock things outside your window. The notebook is a third full. It contains technical notes about plate preparation and developing times, and what happens to image quality under various light conditions. It contains observations about the work, the clients, this strange recurring grammar of the sleep portraits. And it contains, increasingly, these attempts at articulation, the groping toward a language for the thing you are learning, the thing the work is teaching you that has no formal name. February. The cold continues. The murk lifts occasionally. On clear days when the wind comes from the north and blows the smoke off the city, and you get a day of sharp, clean winter light that makes Baker Street look briefly like a different city, a city someone chose and arranged. These days are rare. You treasure them. You develop the best portraits on these days using the natural light that comes through the studio's north window with the shutters opened wide, the kind of light that flatters nothing and reveals everything and makes the images sharp and true. You are on one of these clear days in the second week of February when a boy arrives at the studio door with a letter. The letter is not from any of your established clients. The handwriting is a man's hand, not educated particularly, not poor either. The handwriting of someone who writes with effort and intent, who forms each letter with deliberate care. The address on the back is Southwark. The letter says, "I have heard that you photograph persons during their sleep, and I want to request your service for my daughter. She's 11 years old, and she has not been well since last summer. The physician says she will recover, but she does not recover, and I want a photograph of her while she is sleeping, because she sleeps a great deal now, and it is the only time she is peaceful, and I want to have this in case. I am not a wealthy man, but I will pay what I can. My name is Robert Harker, joiner, at the address above. Please reply. You hold the letter for a while, in case." He has not written, "I want a photograph because she might die." He has written, "I want a photograph in case," the hedging of it, the superstition in it almost, the old taboo against naming the bad thing, the belief that naming it makes it more possible. He's written around the fear, encircled it, addressed it in the vocabulary of practical arrangements and moderate grammatical care, and underneath all of it, in the space the words don't occupy, is, "She might die. My daughter might die. She is 11 years old and she has not been well since last summer, and I want to have her face, just in case." You take the letter to Mr. Aldridge. He reads it once, sets it down. "Tell him yes," he says. "Tell him there is no charge." You look at him. "Write the reply," he says. "No charge. We'll go when he says. Saturday, if he can manage Saturday." He goes back to his work. You write the reply. "No charge. Saturday, if convenient." The reply comes the next day. "Saturday at 2 o'clock. Mr. Harker will be at home. His daughter sleeps in the afternoon. He thanks you for the kindness and says God bless you, which you fold into the letter and put away. Saturday morning is cold and clear. One of the north wind days, the Baker Street light sharp and true through the studio windows. You pack the equipment. Mr. Aldridge packs it, actually. He packs it himself this time, selecting the plates with a particularity that he doesn't always bring to the packing. The best plates, the best lens, everything clean, everything in order. Southwark is south of the river, which means the bridge. You go by cab, which Mr. Aldridge pays for without discussion. The bridge in February is busy, the cold making everyone move quickly. The river below it grey-green and serious, moving at a pace that respects nothing. You look down at it from the cab window as you cross, at the dark water going about its business, and you think of the summer you were told about, the summer when post-mortem photography was first common, when the Thames was slow and foul and the city was a cauldron, the opposite of today. Today the river looks clean, or clean enough. The cold has scrubbed something out of it. The street in Southwark is not the worst street in Southwark, but it is not far from some of them. The houses are joined and narrow, the kind of street where the walls are close enough that two people with their arms extended could touch the walls on both sides simultaneously. The smell is the usual street smell, stronger without the cold wind to move it, the compound of coal and horses and the street itself, and the people living their lives in very close proximity. Mr. Harker's house is the fourth one in. He answers the door himself. A man of about 40, broad-shouldered, the specific physicality of a craftsman who uses his body in his work. His hands are a joiner's hands, the knuckles large, the skin of them darkened in ways the washing can't reach, the same way yours are beginning to be chemical marked. He looks at you both with an expression that is neither pleased nor displeased, but is grateful, very genuinely and very simply grateful, in a way that sits in his face without performance, because there is no performance in it. He is grateful and he shows it. "Come in," he says, "please." The house is small and warm, the kitchen fire going hard, the warmth of it meeting you in the tiny hallway. A woman at the kitchen table, his wife, who does not introduce herself but nods, looks at you with the same expression he wears, the same simple gratitude, and below it the same thing underneath it that he had in his letter, the in case. He leads you upstairs. The stairs are very narrow. Your hand on the railing finds the worn wood smooth in the centre where 10 years of hands have polished it. The girl's room is small, one window facing the street, the north wind light coming through it, a bed with a patchwork cover, a small shelf with 3 books on it, a cup of water on the nightstand. On the wall above the bed, a picture cut from a magazine, a pastoral scene, a meadow, the kind of image that says, there are places that are not this. The girl is asleep on her back. She is very pale. The illness has done the same thing to her that illness does to everyone, the body editing itself, the edges becoming cleaner and therefore sharper, the face on the pillow more pronounced in its bone structure than a healthy face should be. She's 11 years old, and she's been ill since last summer, and she's been asleep a great deal in that time, the illness using sleep as a tool, pulling her under when the body needs to conserve what it has left. But she is breathing. The breathing is not the 3-count pause of Mr. Hartley. It is shallow, but it is even, and it is present, and you check for it with the automatic reflex you've developed. You check for it, and it's there, and you feel the thing you feel when it's there. Mr. Harker stands in the doorway. He has taken off his cap. He's holding it in both hands, slowly turning it. A man's unconscious gesture when he is in a state of controlled feeling. Mr. Aldridge looks at the light, looks at the angle, sets up the tripod in silence, the silence that is his best professional courtesy, the silence that says, I understand what is at stake here. You load the plates. First holder ready, second holder ready. 3 plates. That's what Mr. Aldridge has brought for this room. 3 exposures of an 11-year-old girl who has been ill since last summer. The light through the north window is good. Better than you expected for a Southwark street. The street is narrow, but the window faces the right direction, and the February sun is doing its best with the clear sky. The exposure can be 12 seconds, maybe 10. Mr. Aldridge focuses. Under the cloth, longer than usual. When he emerges, his face is doing what it does, the professional blankness. But he looks at you, and you can see it in his eyes, behind the professional surface. The same thing Mr. Harker's face is doing. The same thing. The exposure. 10 seconds. The first plate. The second. The third. 3 plates. 3 images of a pale girl with a patchwork cover and the cup of water, and the magazine picture of a meadow on the wall above her head, and the breath going in and out. In and out, in and out. The body doing its maintenance in the absence of the self. The body keeping her here. Mr. Harker walks you to the door. He tries, again, to pay. Mr. Aldridge refuses again, with a firmness that closes the question without humiliation. He shakes Harker's hand. He tells him the prints will be ready in 3 days, that he can collect them at Baker Street or that they can be sent. I'll collect them, Harker says. I'd like to. I'll come. Of course, Mr. Aldridge says. In the street, heading back toward the bridge, the north wind cutting down the narrow road, you walk for a while in the ordinary silence before Mr. Aldridge says, "She'll recover." You look at him. "I don't know that," he says, "but I believe it." He turns up his collar against the wind. She has good colour underneath the pallor. Her breathing is regular. The illness hasn't reached her eyes yet. You don't know how he knows this. You suspect he doesn't quite, that this is something he says to manage the weight of the work, the same way the distance manages it. But it sounds true when he says it and you hold it as you cross the bridge, the river below running hard in the February cold, the city arranged around you in all directions, its 800,000 lives proceeding. She will recover. You hope so with a force that surprises you. Mr. Harker comes to Baker Street on the Wednesday. He comes at 11 in the morning, still in his work clothes, sawdust in the creases of his jacket, the smell of fresh wood and glue, that is his trade's particular signature. He looks at the prints in Mr. Aldridge's office with the kind of attention that excludes everything else in the room, the kind that is not examination but recognition. He is finding her in the image, her face in the specificity of that afternoon's light, this exact configuration of her features in this exact state of sleeping. He looks for a long time. Then he says quietly, without looking up, "She looks peaceful." "She does," Mr. Aldridge says. "She doesn't always. When she's awake, it hurts. You can see it hurts. But this..." He stops, clears his throat. "This is her without the hurting," he says. "This is just her." He takes 3 copies of the best print, the middle exposure, the one where the light is most even. He wraps them himself in the brown paper Mr. Aldridge offers, carefully, the way you'd wrap something valuable. He tucks the package under his arm. "Thank you," he says. To both of you, but more to Mr. Aldridge, who receives it with a nod. He leaves, his footsteps on the Baker Street pavement going away. You stand in the office with the smell of sawdust fading and the last of the February sunlight coming through the window, and you think, this is the job. This, specifically, is what the work is for. Not the artistic argument of Miss Ashworth, not the scientific project of Dr. Ellison, not the social documentation of the supper room performers. This, a man in his work clothes looking at his daughter's sleeping face and finding her in it, finding the version of her that exists without the hurting. That is worth 20 seconds of held breath and 12 seconds of exposure, and the cold of the chemical baths and the cracks in your knuckles, and the 14 stairs to the attic room, and all the hours in the dark room in the red light watching faces emerge from the chemistry one after another, the faces of a city you're slowly learning to know. That is what the work is for. Spring, when it comes slowly and then fast the way springs do, the way time compresses when you've been doing the same work long enough that the days stop feeling discrete and start feeling like sections of a longer continuous thing. March brings the first cracks in the cold. April brings rain that is not quite cold enough to be unpleasant, and the smell of things loosening from the frost, earth and green, returning to a city that had gone entirely grey. By May, Baker Street in the morning smells of something other than coal smoke. Not clean exactly. London is never clean, but different, lighter. The heavy chemical winter smell replaced by the compound of wholesome bread and the particular May sharpness of new leaves on the plane trees. You've been in London 7 months. Your hands have stopped cracking. The chemical marks have become a permanent feature of the skin rather than an insult to it. The silver nitrate staining at your nails, not quite removable but no longer expanding. You have good boots now, bought with 2 weeks' savings in March, which has changed the quality of your daily life more than you anticipated. It turns out that the difference between boots with holes and boots without holes is not a minor comfort but a structural one, that keeping your feet dry constitutes most of what is meant by being comfortable, and that you had been not comfortable for 5 months without quite registering the degree of it. The notebook is 3/4 full. You've started a second one. Mr. Harker's daughter, whose name you have learned is Alice, is recovering. Mr. Harker came to the studio in March to tell Mr. Aldridge this, not for any professional reason, just to tell him. She had turned a corner in February. That was the phrase he used, turned a corner, the Victorian idiom for improvement that has the same directional reassurance as the image suggests. The physician is cautiously optimistic. She is eating more. She's sleeping less, which in this case is good news. The body needing less repair. She's awake more, coming back to herself. Mr. Harker had not, he said, told his daughter about the photographs. He would tell her when she was well, when she could see them with uncomplicated eyes. He kept them in the drawer of his writing desk, and he looked at them on the bad nights when the illness plateaued, or seemed to worsen, and the in-case feeling came back. He looked at her sleeping face and found the version of her that existed without the hurting. And then the corner was turned. You write about this in the second notebook, on a May evening with the window open, and London in its spring mood outside, the sound of it different in May than in October, lighter, the voices more carrying in the warmer air. You write, I have stopped believing the photographs do nothing. I don't believe they take anything. But I have come to believe they do something. They make the real thing more real. They fix it. They give the feeling a form that can be held. The fear is grief by another name. The fear of losing the face. The fear of the absence. The fear of the in-case. And the photograph is the answer to the fear. Not because it prevents the loss, but because it insists on the reality of what is here now, right now, in this light, in this face, before anything happens. You put the pen down. The spring evening, London coming in through the window in warm waves. You think about your own sleeping face, which you have never seen. No one has ever pointed a camera at you in sleep. You will not see yourself as Mr. Harker saw Alice, or as Mrs. Hartley saw her husband, or as Miss Ashworth saw herself. Undefended, performing nothing, the face that exists when you're not there to manage it. You will never see that face. No one who does not arrange to see it will ever see it. The face exists. Every night it exists when you close your eyes and the city makes its sounds and the 14 stairs are behind you and the blanket is pulled up against the spring chill that hasn't entirely gone yet. Every night the face of the boy from Britford is there in the attic room above a photography studio on Baker Street, breathing steadily, the body doing its maintenance, the self somewhere else in the dreaming country, and the face. The face is doing something, not performing, not composing itself into the professional expression or the careful neutral expression of someone who has learned to be invisible in other people's houses. Something else. The face the chemistry would find if there were a camera and a photographer and a 12-second exposure. The face that is most yourself precisely because you're not there to make it. You have never seen it, and you never will. This feels like loss. You write that too. Summer comes, and the city smells of itself again. The full July version of London's smell, which is not entirely unpleasant when you're used to it, which by now you are. The river, and the horse, and the coal, and the 10,000 cooking fires, and the specific organic compound of a great many people living in close proximity. You have stopped noticing it the way you stopped noticing the studio's chemical smell, the way you stopped counting the 14 stairs, the way you stopped being surprised by the city's nighttime noise. You are becoming someone who lives here. This is strange and not strange, both things simultaneously. You still think of Britford with the particular colour that home has when it is also the place you left. A warm colour, slightly edged. Your father's letters arrive once a month, careful letters in a careful hand. The news of the village transmitted with the brevity of a man who writes infrequently, and therefore writes only the essential. Your mother sends a parcel in March, socks, a cake, a short note in her different hand, rounder and larger than his, saying, "We hope you're eating properly and wearing enough layers." The cake is slightly stale by the time it arrives, but you eat all of it. You write back, carefully, selecting what to include, the technical progress, the work, the city in spring, not selecting, the sick rooms, the children, the 6th room at Ellison's clinic, the word in the language you couldn't name. These are yours. They live in the 2nd notebook. They are part of becoming the person you are becoming, but they are not part of the letters home. The summer portrait business is the same as every season's portrait business, turned up slightly. More sittings, more families, more of the bread and butter work that funds the bread and the equipment and the Baker Street rent. You do it well. You do it efficiently. You have, in the 7 months since you arrived, become actually useful. Not just learner useful, but worker useful. The kind of useful that has real value to the business, that will be noticed in its absence. Mr. Aldridge gives you a raise in June, not a large one, enough. He tells you in the same way he tells you everything significant, without preamble, directly, in the office over a cup of tea. He names the new figure. You thank him. He nods. The conversation ends. You spend the extra shilling in the first week on a good penknife, and the second week on a book. A volume on photographic chemistry that you've been wanting for months, that costs exactly what you now have available. And then you put the rest away carefully in the tin under your mattress, the same tin you've been adding to since October, the London Savings tin, the future tin that doesn't yet have a specific future attached to it, but requires maintenance regardless. You think about the future sometimes in the way you never did in Britford, where the future was the shape of your father's future and his father's future, the predictable inheritance of the trade. Here the future is less certain in its shape, but more possible in its scope. Mr. Aldridge's shop. Miss Ashworth's paper, which was published in May in a small arts journal, and which contained a reproduction of the fifth plate. Your work, yours and Mr. Aldridge's, though only his name was attached to it, which is correct and ordinary and does not bother you except sometimes, briefly, when you look at the reproduction in the journal and think, I was in that room, I loaded that plate, I counted those 12 seconds, and the open hand on the coverlet is there in the image because I was steady when I needed to be steady. You were there. The image knows it even if the byline doesn't. The second year in London. The end of it. October again. The wheel completing its turn. The city returning to its coal-smoke autumn self. The murk beginning to reassemble in the lower air. The horse traffic throwing up a fine spray of wet mud onto your good boots, which you clean every evening with the patience of someone who remembers the months of wet feet. The commission that changes things arrives on a Thursday morning in the last week of October, which is almost exactly a year from the letter about Mr. Hartley, which is almost exactly a year from the day you first understood what the fear was. The commission is from a man named Ashby, a printer, a publisher of small illustrated books and pamphlets, a man of the kind of intelligence that arranges itself practically rather than philosophically. He wants a series of photographs for a book he is producing on the subject of sleep. Not a scientific book, a popular one, the kind that sells well to the reading public who are interested in the strange and the morbid, without being able to articulate why. He has heard of the sleep portrait work. He has heard it through Ellison's network and through Miss Ashworth's paper and through the specific word of mouth of the kind of professional London that is small enough that the same names recur. He wants 6 sleep portraits, not death portraits, not clinical patients, 6 ordinary people sleeping, photographed in their sleep, for a book called, he shows you the proposed title page, Morpheus and the Lens, Portraits of the Sleeping City. He wants, he says, the truth of the sleeping face. Mr. Aldridge looks at the proposal for a long time, then he looks at you. You'll manage this one, he says. You look at him. I'll supervise, he says, but you'll lead it. The sourcing, the sessions, the developing. You know the work. I know part of it. You know enough. He sets the proposal down. Find 6 subjects. 6 people willing to be photographed sleeping, knowing it will be published. Ordinary people, not clients of ours. I want them spread across the city. Different situations, different kinds of sleeping. Different kinds of sleeping. You know what I mean. You do. You've been thinking about this for a year, about the different valences of sleep, the different things the sleeping face reveals, the ill and the healthy, the afraid and the unafraid, the sleeping that is rest, and the sleeping that is preparation for something, and the sleeping that is the body's last negotiation with the world. Different kinds of sleeping. You find them over the course of November, not easily. This is not an easy commission. You must approach strangers or near strangers with the specific careful proposition. I would like to photograph you while you sleep for a published book. You know about the photograph, you consent to it. You will be awake when I arrive, and you will fall asleep in the ordinary way, and I will take the photograph, and you will wake, and it will be done. The response is what you'd expect. Some refuse immediately, the fear too strong, the vulnerability too obvious. Some agree immediately, the kind of people who don't fear things until they've happened. who approach every novel experience with equanimity. Most are somewhere in between, interested and afraid, the two states coexisting, negotiating, and eventually arriving at a decision. 6 subjects. The first, a woman of 60, a retired seamstress from Bermondsey, whose sister hears about the project through a chain of connections you can't entirely reconstruct. She agrees with the practicality of someone who has lived a long life and is not impressed by the unusual. She says, "I've been sleeping for 60 years. I don't see why a camera changes anything." You photograph her on a Tuesday afternoon, the winter light through her south-facing window, her face in sleep extraordinarily still, the stillness of someone who's been sleeping in the same bed in the same position for decades, who has worn the shape of sleep into her body like a groove into wood. The second, a young man of 22, a clerk in a counting house, who agrees to the sitting partly out of bravado and partly, you suspect, because he is genuinely curious about himself, about the face he presents to the world without knowing it. He is nervous before he falls asleep. You can see it in the restlessness, the repositioning, the face doing the thing faces do when they are aware of being watched. But he falls asleep eventually, the body overriding the anxiety. And when he does, the nervous quality drains out of his face completely, and what is left is something younger than his waking face, less constructed, a face that is still becoming what it will be. The third, Mr. Kavanagh, with Ellison's facilitation in the clinic. The best light of the winter, January clear day, the north wind light coming through the ceiling window. The exposure is 6 seconds. The image is the sharpest you've taken of him. The divided consciousness expression fully legible, the face doing its borrowed work. When Ashby sees this one, he is silent for a long time and then says, "This is the one the book is built around." The fourth, Miss Ashworth, who agrees immediately when you write to her, who sends back a 1-sentence reply, "I would be honoured." She sleeps on the same Friday morning schedule, the 9 o'clock window of remaining stillness, the same bedroom, the same north light. Different season, January rather than November, the light colder and cleaner. She moves in sleep again, the hand uncurling gesture, and you catch it on the second plate. And the expression when you develop it is the same as the 5th plate from the first session, and also different. More settled, more familiar with itself, the face doing the undefended thing as if it has been doing it longer, as if the undefended expression has become its own kind of habit. 2 more to find. You find the 5th in the street. Not literally. Not a stranger, not an ambush. You find him through the Covent Garden supper room, through the network of night work contacts that the Tuesday sessions have built. He is a juggler, not a performer in the main sense, but a street performer who's been trying to work up to proper stage work and hasn't managed it yet, who lives in a room above a tobacconist in Covent Garden, and sleeps during the day because his best work happens at night on the theatre district corners. He is 30, lean, with the specific body of someone whose trade requires absolute physical precision. He agrees to the commission because he says, "I've always wanted to know if I'm still juggling in my sleep." He is not when you photograph him at 11 in the morning in his above tobacconist room. He is lying on his back with his arms at his sides and his face in the deepest, most total sleep you have encountered since the Ellison Clinic. A sleep of pure physical exhaustion. The body that has been doing precise demanding work all night shutting down completely. Not a flicker of dream movement. Not a hint of the precision that his waking body carries. He looks like a different person entirely. A bigger person somehow. The calmness of complete rest making the face generous, unguarded, the working self fully put away. The sixth is the hardest to find and the easiest when you find it. The sixth is in Southwark. Alice Harker is 12 now, fully recovered. It took until the autumn Mr. Harker had written to tell them, but the corner that was turned in February kept going, and by September she was well, and by October she was at school, and by now in January she is what she was before the illness, which is, according to her father, entirely herself. You write to ask if Alice might be willing to be included. You explain the project. You say, she may decline, of course. There is no obligation. But her father's care for her, expressed in the commission of her sleep portrait last winter, seems like the right note on which to end the series. Mr. Harker replies by hand in 3 days. Alice says yes, she wants to. She has seen the prints he kept in his drawer, the prints from last February. He told her about them in the autumn, when she was well enough, and she's looked at them with the equanimity of the young, who have not yet fully developed the fear, who can look at their own sleeping face with curiosity rather than dread. She says, I want to see what I look like when I'm dreaming something good. You go to Southwark on a Saturday morning in late January. The street is the same, narrow, close, the familiar compound of the street's own smell. The house is the same, the warm kitchen, Mrs. Harker at the table, Mr. Harker at the door with his turned cap. But Alice is there, awake, when you arrive, small and 12 and with the specific alertness of a child who has decided to be interested in everything about this situation. She asks you questions while you set up the equipment. How does the camera work? What are the plates made of? How long does it take? Will it hurt? And you answer all of them. The technical questions with technical answers, the subjective ones with what you have learned, which is more than you had a year ago. She asks, does everyone look different when they're asleep? You think about the seamstress, the young clerk, Miss Ashworth, Mr. Kavanagh, the juggler. All 6 faces in sleep, all 6 doing something different, all 6 showing a layer that the waking face doesn't show. Yes, you say, everyone, but not less themselves, just differently themselves. She considers this. I don't mind then, she says. She gets into bed and you pull the curtain partly closed and you wait. She falls asleep faster than you expect. Children sleep differently from adults. The speed of the descent steeper, the body still carrying the skill of it, the unself-conscious surrender to unconsciousness. Within 20 minutes she is deeply under. Her face in sleep is not the pale, ill face of last February. It has colour now, the health colour, the colour of a body that is managing its business properly. The patchwork cover is the same one. The cup of water on the nightstand is the same one, or one exactly like it. You take 3 exposures. The best of them, the middle one, the one where the morning light is most even and the face is turned slightly toward the window, is the best photograph you've taken in 14 months of working with Mr. Aldridge. You know this when you make the exposure, and you know it when you develop it, and you know it when you hold the print to the light in the Baker Street studio. She is dreaming something. You can see it in the faint smile, in the slight upward movement of the corners of her eyes, in the quality of the face that is not simply absent but actively present in another place, in the place where the good dream is happening. She is 12 years old and she was very ill last winter, and she is recovered and she is dreaming something good, and the light and the chemistry have captured it, have fixed this moment, this specific second of this specific morning in this specific face, and it will not change. It will not change. Mr. Harker, standing in the doorway, says nothing. There is nothing to say. Morpheus and the Lens is published in March, a small book, cloth-bound, with the 6 plates reproduced as engravings because direct photographic reproduction in books is not yet common, the technology not quite there. The engravings lose something in the translation. They always do. The chemistry becoming the engraver's line, the specific quality of light becoming approximation. But they are good engravings, by someone who has understood what the originals were doing, and the faces in them are recognizable, the sleeping expressions present. The book sells reasonably well. Ashby sends a copy to Baker Street with a brief note of thanks. It ends up on the shelf in Mr. Aldridge's office next to the volumes on photographic technique and the ledgers. You look at it sometimes. The 6 sleeping faces in their engraved versions. The ones you know. Miss Ashworth's open hand. Mr. Kavanagh's borrowed expression. Alice Harker's good dream. And the ones you are present for but whose faces don't carry the weight of the personal stories. The seamstress in her 60-year groove, the young clerk's becoming face, the juggler's total rest. 6 different sleeps, 6 different truths of the sleeping self, 6 different relationships to the small death, to the departure, to the gap in which the face exists without the person. The book, in its small way, says, the sleeping face is real. It is as real as the wakened face, and more revealing and less controllable, and therefore feared by some, and sought by others, and approached by all of us, every night, whether we consent to it or not. Every night we put down the performance. Every night the face becomes the face it is without us. Every night, including tonight. The second year closes. March becomes April. The studio turns steadily on its commercial axis. Portraits, events, the Tuesday nights at the Covent Garden venue. The supper room has expanded and wants a new set of performer portraits, and you go alone now without Mr. Aldridge, which is a different thing from going with him. A thing that requires you to occupy a different space in the room, a more central space, a space that has more authority in it and therefore more responsibility, and therefore, occasionally, more fear. You are not afraid, not often, not anymore. April, May, your second London spring. The plane trees on Baker Street do what they do, the pale green of the new leaves appearing almost overnight, the way it always seems to happen suddenly even though it takes weeks. You notice it on a morning when you're opening the studio shutters and the sun comes through the new leaves and the light on the pavement is different, green-tinged, filtered, the specific light of spring that has nothing to do with any other season's light. You stand in the doorway for a moment, just standing. The city is doing its morning things. The milk, the bread, the early traffic, the beginning of the day. Around you, in the houses and rooms and streets of London, people are waking up, passing back through the boundary, coming back from wherever sleep sent them, returning to their faces, reoccupying their performances. And some of them, the ones who sleep deeper, or the ones whose bodies need more of the time beyond the boundary, some of them are still under, still over there, in the dreaming country, in the country where the camera has never gone, and where you cannot follow, where the face does whatever it does in the dark, and the body keeps the breath going, and no one knows what is happening in there. All across London, the seamstress in Bermondsey, the clerk in his counting-house rooms, Mr. Kavanagh in Ellison's clinic where the dawn light has not yet reached the ceiling windows, Alice Harker in Southwark with the patchwork cover pulled up against the April chill. All sleeping, all with the face that exists when the person isn't there. And you, in 4 minutes, will go inside and put the kettle on and start the day, and you will not think about this again in quite this form, this concentrated form that comes sometimes in the morning doorway, when the light is right and the city is just starting. You will not think about it. You'll be working. You'll be doing the 10,000 small specific acts that the work requires. But you have thought about it. You've been thinking about it since October, since the first letter from Mrs. Hartley, since the first developing tray in the red dark with the dead woman's sleeping face, since the first time you understood that the sleeping photograph is not about the camera at all. It's about the gap. It's about being in the gap, being asleep, being departed, being the face without the person, and having someone care enough to look. Mrs. Hartley cared enough. Mr. Harker cared enough. Miss Ashworth was strange and specific enough to want to see it for herself. Dr. Ellison was scientific enough to document it. And you were here. You loaded the plates. You counted the seconds. You carried the equipment through the streets of London in every kind of weather. And you stood in the rooms where people were sleeping. And you tried to be as invisible as possible. Tried to be the gap within the gap. The presence the sleeping person couldn't know about. The eye that found the face that didn't know it was being found. And you developed the images. And in the red dark, in the chemistry, in the slow emergence of the face from the silver, you were the first person to see what sleep looks like. Not your own sleep, someone else's. Over and over, someone else's sleeping face, the truth of it, the undefended layers of it, the thing the face does when the person who owns it is somewhere you can't follow. The kettle, the day. You go inside. That evening you sit in the office after Mr. Aldridge has gone upstairs in the last of the spring light that is holding longer now than it did in February. The days opening up, the light staying later every week. You have a cup of tea, the last of the pot, slightly cold. The studio behind the closed door is ready for tomorrow. Plates loaded, backdrop set, the posing chair adjusted for the morning's first client. You have the second notebook open in front of you, the last few pages of it. You write, April, 1879, 18 months. I came here knowing how to develop a photograph. I know more than that now. I know what it costs a person to be seen, and what it costs a person not to be seen. I know the difference between the face that is performing and the face that has stopped. I know that the fear of the sleeping photograph is a real fear about a real thing. Not about the camera, but about the gap. About the self that departs every night and leaves the body to manage. About the vulnerability of being present in a room without being present. I know that the comfort of the sleeping photograph is the same thing, the same reality, just approached from the other direction. Both things, an acknowledgement that sleep is real, that the face in sleep is real, that the person is there even when they aren't. Both things, the fear and the comfort coming from the same place, the love of faces, the terror of losing them, the need to hold something against the dark. He doesn't know I'm here, and none of them knew, and the bow was correct. That wasn't the point. The point was, we were there. The camera was there. The image was made. The face is fixed. The face will not change. You close the notebook. Outside, Baker Street in April. The sound of it. The horse, the cart, the voices, the specific accretion of life in a city at evening. That is the only music this city has. The music of itself, of 800,000 people, living and working and conducting their business and going home and going out and going to sleep, eventually all of them. every night, going to sleep every night. You think, I should write to my parents. You think I should eat something. You think, the plate in room 3 at Ellison's clinic, the moving lips, and none of them knew. And what they didn't know was that she was there, in the dream geography, present and invisible simultaneously, the way the self is always present and invisible in sleep, present in the body, invisible to the body somewhere else, somewhere that doesn't report back. You are tired, not the bad kind of tired, the good kind, the kind that has a day of work behind it, real work, work that mattered or will matter, work that has produced something that someone will hold in their hands in 3 days and look at and find a face they love in it. The specific satisfaction of work done properly. The April evening. You should go upstairs. You sit for a moment longer. The tea in your hand, cooling. The notebook closed on the desk. The studio behind the door ready for tomorrow. All across London, the evening is doing its evening things. The last of the shops closing. The first of the night establishments opening. The families eating their suppers in the parlour or the kitchen according to what they can afford. The children being told to come in from wherever they've been. The dusk coming. The day over. And soon, an hour from now or 2, the children going to sleep. The way they do, the way Alice Harker went to sleep on a Saturday morning with a question about the good dream, the quick drop, the immediate depth of it, the body remembering the skill of childhood, and then the adults, later, after the supper and the evening and the lamp turned down and the city's noise still present but beginning to soften at the edges, the late-night softening of London's sound when the bulk of its business is concluded and only the stubborn remainder continues. And then you, 14 stairs, the rope mattress, improved by a second blanket that is now a permanent fixture rather than a winter emergency, the window with the cat's wall visible in the dark, the city's sound, and then the gap, and then whatever the face does when the person is somewhere else. You will not see it. No one will see it. But it will happen. It happens every night. The small departure, the small death, the face becoming the face that belongs to no performance, to no professional necessity, to no particular effort or intention. The face that is just the body's version of you, maintained in the dark, kept going while you're elsewhere. The face is there now, actually. It's just not yours. Not right now. You're awake. You're here in the office with the April evening and the cold tea, but somewhere in London it is there, right now, in a room you don't know. A face in sleep doing the thing that sleeping faces do. The thing that the camera can catch if the light is right and the plate is properly prepared and the exposure is correct and the photographer is steady and quiet and careful not to disturb the room. The face that is most itself precisely because the self is not there to make it. You set down the tea, stand up, put the notebook in the drawer. Tomorrow there are 2 sittings and a delivery to make and 3 plates from today to develop and a letter to write to your father. Tomorrow is a full day. Tomorrow the studio opens at 9 and the city will be doing its daytime things and the work will proceed and you will be in it, doing your part of it, becoming steadily more the person who does this work until the work and the person are the same thing. But that's tomorrow. Tonight you go upstairs. The 14 stairs, the window, the blanket, the city making its 10 o'clock sounds. You lie down. The April night. London still going outside, the way it always is, the way it never isn't. A carriage, voices, something metal on stone, somewhere far enough away to be a sound rather than a noise. The cat probably on the courtyard wall, though tonight it's quiet. Tonight everything is as quiet as London gets, which is not very quiet, but is a kind of quiet, a relative quiet, the quiet of a city that has done most of its day and is moving through the last of it. Your eyes close. The darkness of the room is different from the dark room's darkness, warmer, less purposeful, not working darkness, just night. You think, briefly, of the 6 sleep portraits, the book on Mr. Aldridge's shelf, Alice Harker's Good Dream, the seamstress in her 60-year groove, the shape of her face in sleep, the specific truth of it, the less performed truth, the more inward truth, the face you're making right now in this room with no camera and no one watching and no plate to hold it, the face you will never see. It's all right. It's happening anyway. Every night it happens anyway. The departure, the small death, the body maintaining what you leave behind, keeping it safe, keeping it running, keeping the breath going, keeping the heart going, keeping the face in whatever arrangement the relaxed and unperformed self produces when there is no one left to produce for. The sounds of the city get softer, or you get farther from them, one of the two, the boundary moving. The April night in London, 1879, the studio below, the street outside, the river somewhere south of here, going where it goes, the ships in the estuary, the ones that have come from everywhere and the ones that are going there, the hospital at Greenwich where old sailors watch the river, the bridges, the gas lamps, the 10,000 chimneys breathing smoke into the April sky that is clear enough tonight for stars if you are outside to look, if you are still awake enough to look. You are almost not. The small death, the gap. All across London right now, people are in it, in the gap, in the sleeping country, their faces doing the unperformed thing, their bodies the maintained thing, the breath in and out in the darkness of their rooms, the city going on outside their windows without asking their permission, the world continuing in the absence of their awareness, the night moving through its stages toward the dawn that will find them most of themselves but not quite all, the self that returns from the somewhere else, slightly unable to account for where it's been. This is what sleep is. You know this now. The face in the tray, the chemistry, the red dark, the 20 seconds, the breathing with its pauses, the open hand on the coverlet. You know this. The darkness takes you, the way it takes everyone, the way it has been taking everyone in this city for as long as there has been a city, the way it will keep taking everyone long after every building you can see from the Baker Street window has been torn down and rebuilt, and torn down again, long after every person whose face you've fixed in silver and glass is gone, long after the chemistry changes and the technology changes and the world changes, the way everything changes into something you cannot imagine from here, in this room, in this year. Long after all of that, people will still do this. Lie down in the dark, close their eyes, go where you go, and the face will still be there, doing whatever the face does. The less performed, more inward, most true face. The one that belongs to no one's expectations, that answers to nothing. That is simply the body's version of the person, kept in trust until the person returns. The face that exists when you're not there. It exists right now. It's enough. More than enough. Let the darkness come. Let the sounds of Baker Street fade behind their glass, behind the particular distance that sleep creates between you and the world, the soft recession of everything that isn't the interior. Let the day go. It was a good day, or parts of it were. The April light through the new leaves, the work done properly, the notebook closed. Tomorrow there will be plates to develop and clients to see, and the 14 stairs again, and the city that never stops, and the work that is always more than you have done and less than there is to do. But that's tomorrow. Right now there is only this, the breath, the dark, the face doing its private thing, the city breathing all around you, the great sleeping and not sleeping city, the city that contains everything you have learned in the gap between arriving with £3 and 4 shillings and the person you are now, the person whose hands know the work, whose eyes know the difference between a sleeping face and a dead face, whose heart has learned, slowly, specifically through the sick rooms and the red dark and the 6 plates and the girl in Suffolk, who wanted to see what she looked like dreaming something good. The person who knows what the fear is and what the comfort is, and that they are the same. Let it come, the small death, the gap, the face that is most yours when you're not there to claim it. Centuries from now, people will still lie down in their rooms and do exactly this. Different rooms, different cities maybe, different technologies entirely for fixing images and keeping faces, but the same darkness, the same breath, the same departure into the somewhere else. Some things don't change. The human need for sleep doesn't change. The human need to be kept, to have the face kept, to have someone who cares about the face, the sleeping face, the undefended face, the face that cannot perform, to have someone who cares enough to look. That doesn't change. Let it come. Let the last of the day go with it. Let the sound soften and the thoughts slow and the face become whatever it becomes. You've earned this. You've been here. You did the work. Sleep. Good night.